നമുക്ക് അധികം അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് തന്നെ 3 ബുക്കുകൾ മാർക്കറ്റിൽ അവൈലബിൾ ആണ്. അതിന് വളരെ ഈ അടുത്ത കാലത്താണ് ഇത്രയും പ്രചാരം വരികയും ഈ ഒരു അദ്ദേഹം മുന്നോട്ട് വച്ച ഒരു സമയത്തിനെ ഖണ്ഡിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് രണ്ടാമതൊരു സമയം പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ളത് വളരെ കുറവാണ്. അദ്ദേഹം മുന്നോട്ട് വച്ച കാരണങ്ങളെ ഖണ്ഡിക്കാനായിട്ട് പല ഇൻഡോളജിസ്റ്റുകൾക്കും സാധിച്ചിട്ടില്ല എന്നുള്ളൊരു കാര്യമാണ്. എങ്കിൽ കൂടിയും ക്ഷമിക്കണം, എങ്കിൽ കൂടിയും പല കാര്യങ്ങളിലും പല ഭാഗത്തുനിന്നും അതിൻ്റെതായ കോൺട്രവേഴ്സീസും ഉണ്ട് എന്നുള്ളത് നമ്മൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നു. ഇവിടെ താഴെ ഇരിക്കുന്നവർ, നിങ്ങളെ ഫോളോ ചെയ്യുന്നവരെ ഒന്ന് പിങ് ചെയ്യണമെന്ന് അഭ്യർത്ഥിക്കുകയാണ്. കൂടുതൽ ആൾക്കാർ ജോയിൻ ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് സഹായകരമായിരിക്കും. നമ്മുടെ അതിഥി നൈലേഷൊക്കെ ജോയിൻ ചെയ്ത ശേഷം ഞാൻ ഈ ഒരു കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേഷൻ്റെ ഒരു ഇംഗ്ലീഷിലേക്ക് മാറ്റും. അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ആ ഒരു ലെക്ചറിൻ്റെ പ്രസക്ത ഭാഗങ്ങളിൽ നമുക്ക് അതിൻ്റെ ഇൻ്റർവെല്ലുകളിൽ അത് ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് പറയുകയും ചെയ്യാം. ഞാൻ മുമ്പ് പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ തന്നെ അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ബുക്കുകളുണ്ട്. ഞാനത് കുറച്ച് സമയത്തിനുള്ളിൽ ഞാനത് മുകളിൽ പിൻ ചെയ്യാം. അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെതായിട്ടുള്ള 3 ബുക്കുകളുണ്ട്. കൂടുതൽ ബുക്കുകൾ വരാനിരിക്കുന്നു. അത് കുറച്ച് സമയത്തിനുള്ളിൽ ഞാൻ പിൻ ചെയ്യാം. ഞങ്ങളുടെ യൂട്യൂബ് ചാനലിൽ ഇപ്പോൾ ഈ ഒരു പ്രോഗ്രാം ലൈവായിട്ട് പോയിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. അത് കൂടുതൽ ആൾക്കാരിലേക്ക് ഷെയർ ചെയ്യണമെന്ന് അഭ്യർത്ഥിക്കുകയാണ്. അദ്ദേഹം ജോയിൻ ചെയ്തു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഉടനെ തന്നെ നമുക്ക് പ്രോഗ്രാം സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യാവുന്നതാണ്. അതിൽ കുറച്ച് ആൾക്കാർ വരുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ടും ജോയിൻ ചെയ്യുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ടുമാണ് നമ്മളത് കുറച്ച് മുൻപ് നമ്മളത് തുടങ്ങിയത്. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് പ്രത്യേകം പറയേണ്ട ഒരു കാര്യം, നമ്മൾ ഏതാണ്ട് 3 മാസം മുമ്പ് അദ്ദേഹത്തോട് നമ്മൾ ഈ ഒരു ഡേറ്റ് ചോദിച്ചിരുന്നതാണ്. അത്രയും സമയത്തിന് ശേഷമാണ് നമുക്ക് ഈ ഒരു ഡേറ്റ് കിട്ടുന്നത്. എൻ്റെ ഓർമ്മ ശരിയാണെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഞാനത് ഫെബ്രുവരിയിൽ വാങ്ങിയതാണ് ഈ ഡേറ്റ്. ഇത്രയും സമയത്തിനുള്ളിൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇത്രയും സമയമെടുത്താണ് അത് കൺഫേം ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് സാധിച്ചത്. അതിൽ അങ്ങനെ ഒരു നമുക്കത് എടുത്ത് ക്ലബ് ഹൗസിലേക്ക് അദ്ദേഹത്തെ കൊണ്ടുവരാനായിട്ട് സാധിച്ചതിൽ വളരെയധികം സന്തോഷമുണ്ട്. അതിൽ കേൾക്കാനായിട്ട് വന്നിട്ടുള്ള പ്രേക്ഷകരെയും പ്രത്യേകം അഭിനന്ദിക്കുന്നു. ഈ ഒരു ക്ലബ്ബ്, സത്യമേവ എന്നുള്ള ക്ലബ്ബ് ഫോളോ ചെയ്യാത്തവരുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഒന്ന് ഫോളോ ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് അഭ്യർത്ഥിക്കുകയാണ്. അതുപോലെ മോഡറേറ്റേഴ്സിനെയും ഫോളോ ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് അഭ്യർത്ഥിക്കുന്നു. അദ്ദേഹം ജോയിൻ ചെയ്ത് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഉടനെ തന്നെ നമുക്ക് ഈ കാര്യപരിപാടികളിലേക്ക് കടക്കാം. അദ്ദേഹം ചോദ്യോത്തരങ്ങളെ പറ്റിയിട്ട് ചെറിയൊരു ഒരു കാര്യം പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. അത് ഇതാണ്: സാധാരണ ചോദ്യം ചോദിക്കുന്നതിന് മുൻപ് നമ്മൾ അതിനൊരു ആമുഖം പറയാറുണ്ട്. അദ്ദേഹം നമ്മളോട് പ്രത്യേകം പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നു ആ ഒരു ആമുഖത്തിൻ്റെ ആവശ്യമില്ല, ചോദ്യം നേരെ ചോദിക്കുന്നതാണ് അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് ഇഷ്ടം എന്ന് ആദ്യമേ പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ ചോദ്യം ചോദിക്കാൻ മുകളിലേക്ക് വരുന്നവർ ആ ചോദ്യം നേരെ ചോദിക്കാനായിട്ട് ശ്രദ്ധിച്ചോളൂ. കാരണം അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് അതാണ് സൗകര്യം. അതിലൊരു വലിയൊരു ആമുഖത്തിൻ്റെ ആവശ്യമില്ല എന്ന് അദ്ദേഹം പ്രത്യേകം പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. അതിൽ ക്രിറ്റിസിസം ആണെങ്കിലും നമുക്ക് തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും എടുക്കാവുന്നതാണ്. പക്ഷേ അതിൽ അതിഥിയോടുള്ള ബഹുമാനം കാത്തു സൂക്ഷിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് അത് ചോദിക്കുക. പിന്നെ ചോദിക്കുന്നവർ പ്രത്യേകം ശ്രദ്ധിക്കുക, നിങ്ങൾ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്ന ഉത്തരം കിട്ടണമെന്ന് വാശി പിടിക്കരുത്. മറിച്ച് നമുക്ക് അദ്ദേഹത്തോട് നമ്മുടെ സംശയങ്ങൾ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അഭിപ്രായ വ്യത്യാസങ്ങൾ പറയാം. നമുക്ക് അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ അഭിപ്രായം കേൾക്കുകയും ചെയ്യാം. ഞാൻ ആദ്യം സൂചിപ്പിച്ച പോലെ തന്നെ ഇതിൽ കൃത്യമായ ഇടവേളകളിൽ അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞ കാര്യങ്ങളുടെ ഒരു ഹൈലൈറ്റ് നമുക്ക് പറയാനായിട്ട് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും അത് ആ ഇടവേളകളിൽ മലയാളത്തിൽ അത് പറയാവുന്നതാണ്. അത് ഹൈലൈറ്റ്സ് ആയിരിക്കും പറയുന്നത്. അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞ മുഴുവൻ കാര്യങ്ങളും വേർഡ് ബൈ വേർഡ് നമുക്കത് ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാനുള്ള സമയം അനുവദിക്കുന്നില്ല. പകരം അതിലെ പറഞ്ഞതിലെ പ്രസക്ത ഭാഗങ്ങൾ തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും മലയാളത്തിൽ ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് പറയാനായിട്ട് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. അത് തീർച്ചയായും ചെയ്യുകയും ചെയ്യാം. ഈ താഴെ ഇരിക്കുന്നവർ നിങ്ങളെ ഫോളോ ചെയ്യുന്നവർ ഒന്ന് പിങ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് അഭ്യർത്ഥിക്കുകയാണ്. മാക്സിമം ആൾക്കാർ എത്തുന്നതിന് അത് സഹായകരമായിരിക്കും. Nilesh ji, namaste. Nilesh ji, I hope you can hear me. Your mic is not visible. Probably actually you need to actually unmute it from the right side of your mobile. Sometimes actually it creates problem. You may need to exit and come back so that this problem will be sorted out. Sometimes it happens that actually once we go in, even if you unmute the mic, it may not work. In the meantime, actually, I'll give you a brief introduction about Mr. Nilesh. Nilesh is an author, researcher, speaker, and a corporate consultant. He holds BS and MS in chemical engineering and an executive MBA. He has published 3 books and writes extensively on ancient Indian history. Nilesh helps Indians become aware of the deep antiquity of Indian civilization so that they truly comprehend, present, or defend the grand narrative of India, unlike most other Indic researchers, because he builds it through scientific acumen and logical reasoning. He is adjunct faculty at the Institute of Advanced Sciences, Dartmouth, MA, USA. We are waiting for him to come back. Nilesh, I hope you can hear me now. You can unmute and talk to us. Nilesh? Nilesh, actually your mic is still not visible. You can unmute from your mobile. You might be doing it. The right hand bottom side of your screen, you can see the mic. If you could please unmute and try to speak. Nilesh, and you may need to actually know, sometimes actually it's if you have installed this actually after a bit of time in your new mobile or something, you may need to grant permission for accessing the mic. That permission need to be given from the app settings, app permissions from settings. That could also be a reason. If you go to the settings, app permissions, go to Clubhouse in the list and give permission for the mic. Nilesh, I hope you can hear me. And
Yeah. You hear me now?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, we can. All right. So what was the problem?
Well, I have not used Clubhouse many times. I had to do back and forth, and I solved it, but I can't even tell you how I solved it. So it's
It's our
it was
pleasure
not
to have you
allowing.
here.
Thank you. It was not allowing me to unmute myself. I could see the sign, but now I am here, so that's good. Go ahead, please.
All right. So I was giving a brief introduction about yourself, and I have told the audience about what we have discussed regarding the question answer session. That they can go ahead and actually ask the question directly rather than giving a long preface to it. And also, I have mentioned that it's a 2-hour program. First hour is for explaining the topic, and second hour is for the question answer session. So I have explained all this,
Very good.
and I think actually we can go ahead, like we discussed at certain intervals, as you suggest. Let me know. I will translate the highlights to them.
Perfect. So yeah, I will.
Oh,
Namaskar, everyone, and thank you for joining. Keep in mind, you may be number of you may be Clubhouse experts, but I am a newbie here, so I'm getting used to this. As I begin, what I will do is I will take periodic pauses and let Ravishankar ji uh, do the summary in Malayalam. Now, those of you who may not be fluent in Malayalam, like me, for example, I want you to see this as a great opportunity to train to train your ear for the Malayalam. You know, I love to do that. I actually do it in all different languages, of course, languages of India, but even outside languages. When you go to these different places and just sit there and listen to it, it's amazing and surprising how much you actually start understanding it, you know, even with the zero knowledge of that language. Now, that's not the issue with the Malayalam. You will find many Sanskrit words, many words that are familiar with your mother tongue, and so on. Those of you who may not be aware, in case like why we are doing this, there are many reasons we are doing it, but one of the reason, or one of the way at least you can use it, is to prepare your ear for Malayalam if you are not familiar with it. Okay, and that will be a very interesting one. So Ravi Shankar ji, I will tell you when I take a pause and if when I want you to summarize it. So thank you, everyone. I want to begin this by stating, preparing all of us, audience, bring them on the same page, okay, which is this. We are going to talk about the dating of Mahabharata. We are going to talk about the specific evidence that allows us to come to a very unique date based on scientific evidence, empirically tested, objectively tested from the Mahabharata text. No buts, no ifs. Okay, so it's a very excellent work that Vyasadeva did for us. We are fortunate to have it. And all I am doing is using all the progress of modern science, modern technology, using it with the background knowledge of all the great acharyas have done in writing commentaries on Mahabharata, but also all the great people that we don't even know their names, who have preserved this great history for us. Otherwise, we would have nothing to discuss. To set the stage, it's very important that everyone who is listening here to understand that Mahabharata is an historical event. Okay, that's not the subject we are discussing, whether Mahabharata is truly history or not. Now, in an indirect fashion, we will discuss it, because as you start seeing the evidence and how fascinating, crucial, magnificent the evidence is, which is impossible for any one of us to know today or go back and write in a fictional novel. It's impossible. Okay, that's the kind of quality evidence we are going to see in multidisciplinary science. But the point is, if anyone has a doubt, is Mahabharata history, then it's very important to understand, then that's not the subject we are discussing today. History is kind of, we are going to understand, we are going to accept it's a history, because unless it's a history, there is no question of dating a specific time of that event. You know, if it's not a true event of the past, where comes the question of dating it? Okay, so that's number one. Now, if you have a doubt whether it's a history or not, I will not blame you. Okay, because British have done a, I mean, colonialists have done a very impressive job of it, and we have also done a very impressive lazy job of it, that we meaning all of Indians I'm talking, or people who are interested in Indic civilization, have not done the tapasya that is required to get rid of the utter nonsense that was taught to us over last 200 plus years. and internalized by us. So we are not just blaming the European Indologists. Okay? So this presentation is about when did the Mahabharata war happen, and thus by implication, I'm going to briefly talk about the deep antiquity of Indian civilization. Mahabharata is just a starting point. There is a deep antiquity beyond Mahabharata that is not a subject today. But it's very important that we understand that it's a historical event, and we are going to date the event today, talk about how I dated the event, not whether it is a history or not. If that is your dilemma, that's a okay dilemma to have, but then you came to a wrong lecture. Ravishankarji, if you want to give your
ഡെഫിനറ്റ്ലി
summary of it.
ഡെഫിനറ്റ്ലി ഡെഫിനറ്റ്ലി അദ്ദേഹം ഇപ്പോൾ സംസാരിച്ചത് മഹാഭാരതം ഒരു ചരിത്ര സംഭവമാണോ അല്ലയോ എന്നുള്ളതാണ് നിങ്ങളുടെ ചോദ്യമെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങളൊരു പക്ഷേ തെറ്റായ ഒരു ചർച്ചയിലേക്കാണ് കടന്നു വന്നിരിക്കുന്നത്. കാരണം ഇവിടെ അവതരിപ്പിക്കാൻ പോകുന്ന വിഷയം മഹാഭാരത യുദ്ധം എപ്പോൾ സംഭവിച്ചു എന്നതിനെക്കുറിച്ചാണ്. അത് ഇന്ത്യൻ നാഗരികതയുടെ ആഴത്തിലുള്ള പ്രാചീനതയാണ് പറയുന്നത്. അതിന് സാങ്കേതികമായ ശാസ്ത്രീയമായ തെളിവുകളുമാണ് ഈ ഒരു ചർച്ചയിലൂടെ, ഈ ഒരു പ്രഭാഷണത്തിലൂടെ നമ്മൾ മുൻപോട്ട് വയ്ക്കാനായിട്ട് പോകുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ ഇവിടെ മഹാഭാരതം ഒരു ചരിത്ര സംഭവമാണോ അല്ലയോ എന്നുള്ളതൊരു ചോദ്യമേ അല്ല, മറിച്ച് അത് ചരിത്രമാണ്. അത് അതിൻ്റെ കാലഘട്ടം എങ്ങനെ നിർണ്ണയിക്കപ്പെടുന്നു എന്നുള്ളതാണ് നമ്മളിവിടെ ചർച്ച ചെയ്യുന്നത്. നിലേഷ്, ബാക്ക് ടു യു.
Thank you. Now, if I tell you that my name is Nilesh, I mean, right now we are just on a Clubhouse. Ravishankarji introduced himself as Ravishankarji. I am introducing myself as Nilesh. And if anyone has, if no one has a doubt that whether I'm truly a Nilesh or not, even when you cannot see my face, just hear the name, that we do it in practice all the time. Like we say, hey, what time do you have right now? What is the time? Somebody tells you the time and you trust the person because you say, why would that person give me something wrong, right? Unless there is some defect with the clock or something. My point is, if you get some information and if there is no doubt about it, there is nothing more to be done unless there is a doubt. Samshaya in Indian tradition. And when does this samshaya arises? When we have multiple answers for the same question. And the question today we're talking is, when did the Mahabharata war happen? Now I want to give you a quick background, which is to say, over last 400 plus years, and there may be many more before that, but we have to stop somewhere, so I'm taking last 400 years. I can tell you that there are close to 130 plus different Mahabharata researchers who have practically come up with those many different dates, more or less. Okay, now may not be exactly 130 plus, maybe 100, but more or less those many 100 plus different dates for the timing of Mahabharata war. Now this creates a problem for ordinary people, right? They say, oh my god, like, so were there multiple Mahabharata wars? And if not, there is only one, how come we are having these different dates? Now, people, either with their own understanding or rather a wrong understanding, they come to they draw their own different conclusions. For example, somebody may think the very fact many people come up with the different dates, maybe because the Mahabharata evidence is not consistent. They may think maybe there are problems with the astronomy software. Those of us, like including myself, who use astronomy data to decide the date of Mahabharata war. Some others may think Mahabharata researchers don't know Sanskrit, so therefore they must not be translating it right, and therefore they are causing confusion. And some others may even think Mahabharata researchers do not know astronomy. I'll tell you, many of the Mahabharata researchers who claim to come up with the date of Mahabharata using astronomy truly don't know Mahabharata astronomy. I mean, don't know Mahabharata and don't know astronomy, but that's a different subject. And some people also wrongly conclude maybe the astronomy evidence is not reliable. Okay, so these are the different conclusions. They are not correct, but that's what usually people do. Ravishankarji, to you.
താങ്ക് യു. ഏതാണ്ട് 130-ലധികം മഹാഭാരത ഗവേഷകരുണ്ട്. അവർ മഹാഭാരത യുദ്ധത്തിന് വർഷത്തിന് വ്യത്യസ്തമായ തീയതികൾ അവകാശപ്പെടുന്നുമുണ്ട്. ഈ ഒരു നിഗമനങ്ങൾ, ഈ ഒരു റിസൾട്ടുകൾ ആശയക്കുഴപ്പം ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്നതാണ്. അത് നിരവധി നിഗമനങ്ങളിലേക്ക് നയിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നു. അത് ഈ നിഗമനങ്ങൾ ഇങ്ങനെയൊക്കെയാണ്. മഹാഭാരതത്തിൻ്റെ തെളിവുകൾ പരസ്പരം യോജിക്കാത്തവയായിരിക്കാം. ഒരു പക്ഷേ ജ്യോതിശാസ്ത്രത്തിൻ്റെ ആ ഒരു സോഫ്റ്റ്വെയർ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നത് പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്നതാവാം. അതായത് ഈ ആശയക്കുഴപ്പങ്ങൾക്ക്, അതായത് ഈ ശാസ്ത്രജ്ഞർ പറയുന്ന ഡേറ്റുകൾക്ക് ആശയക്കുഴപ്പം ഉണ്ടാകുന്നത് ഈ പറയുന്ന കാരണങ്ങൾ കൊണ്ടായിരിക്കാം. ഒന്ന്, മഹാഭാരതത്തിലെ തെളിവുകൾ പരസ്പരം യോജിക്കാത്തതായിരിക്കാം. മഹാഭാരതത്തിലുള്ള തെളിവുകൾ പരസ്പരം യോജിക്കാത്തതായിരിക്കാം. ഒരു പക്ഷേ ജ്യോതിശാസ്ത്ര സോഫ്റ്റ്വെയറിലുള്ള പ്രശ്നങ്ങളായിരിക്കാം. അത് കൃത്യമായി പ്രവചിക്കാത്തതായിരിക്കാം. മൂന്നാമത്തത്, മഹാഭാരത ഗവേഷകർക്ക് സംസ്കൃതം ഒരുപക്ഷെ അറിയില്ലായിരിക്കാം. 4, മഹാഭാരത ഗവേഷകർക്ക് ഒരുപക്ഷെ ജ്യോതിശാസ്ത്രം നല്ലപോലെ അറിയില്ലായിരിക്കാം. ഒരുപക്ഷെ ഇത് രണ്ടുമാവാം. 5, ജ്യോതിശാസ്ത്ര തെളിവുകൾ വിശ്വസനീയമല്ലായിരിക്കാം എന്നൊരു കാരണം കൂടി ഉണ്ടായിരിക്കാം. ഇതാണ് ഇപ്പൊ പറഞ്ഞതിന്റെ ഒരു സംക്ഷിപ്ത രൂപം. നരേഷ്, ബാക്ക് ടു യു.
Thank you. So now let's understand, so what is the reality? Now, of course, the one assumption is that you are stuck with me for next 2 hours, right? So you have joined it obviously because of, say, Shraddha in Ravishankar ji, what great work he is doing, or you might have you may be a little bit familiar with my work. The point is, at least for this session, it's important that you have a Shraddha in my words and Shraddha in Ravishankar ji's words. Not to say that therefore afterwards you go blindly and don't do anything. In fact, I'm going to end the talk with what specific things you should do. But I want to tell you the reality of it. This is very important for the Indic Renaissance, okay? To take us out of some of the misunderstanding that is been deliberately created or deliberately spread by both Western Indologists and also their lackeys in India, okay? They come in all forms. And then there are some other novice, simple people who, without any discrimination, accept this information and just spread it innocently. So what is the reality? The reality is that majority of these Mahabharata researchers, so I mentioned like 130 plus as a generic number, what you will find, you may not find, but I'm telling you from my 30 plus years of experience dealing with them, reading their works, analyzing their works, that I can tell you with a confidence that majority, there are of course great exceptions, okay, and we will talk about them in the question answer session if we get time. Majority of them, I'm saying with a confidence 99%, okay, just to make that point, have not bothered to actually read the Mahabharata text. That is point number one. Then what happens? Most of them do not use the Mahabharata evidence to narrow down their date. They don't use Mahabharata evidence to arrive at the date. So how do they do it? What do they do? Rather, actually, they have a date in their mind. How do they get that date? Maybe they have read somewhere. Maybe their guru tells them. Maybe they read in some book. Maybe they have their own imagination. Okay, some other random assumptions of Kali Yuga beginning, some Shila Lake, some Tamrapat, the copper plate, and so on. Based on that, they make up their mind and they say, you know what, let me prove this date. So a priori, before even finding evidence, they already have a date in their mind. And then they start looking for evidence which will fit their date. Okay, this is such a mainstream phenomenon, such a rampant phenomenon. It will puzzle you, it will dazzle you, it will amaze you. And then occasionally what they will do is they will look at some evidence gathering that is done by likes of me or likes of great Pavakane, Dr. P.V. Vartak, Bharat Ratna Pavakane, or Bharatacharya C.V. Vaidya, Lele Shastri, great astronomer S.B. Dikshit. So they will look at their works, and if they find some evidence that seem to match their preconceived date, they will say, look, here is some evidence from Mahabharata that also matches. I will also mention one last point, that majority of Mahabharata researchers lack the basics of scientific methodology, scientific acumen, and logical reasoning skills. Now, the last statement I said, it's a very serious statement. In fact, almost like, if another Mahabharata researcher should get angry, not rightfully, but will get angry. Like, what are you telling me, that I don't have a scientific acumen, I don't understand scientific methodology, and I don't have logical reasoning skills? Interestingly, nobody comes and asks me that question. In fact, I'm waiting for somebody to ask me the question so that we can have a wonderful samvad. Okay, back to you, Ravishankar ji.
താങ്ക് യു നരേഷ്. ഭൂരിപക്ഷം മഹാഭാരത ഗവേഷകർക്കും ഏതാണ്ട് 99% ആൾക്കാർക്കും മഹാഭാരതം ശരിക്ക് പഠിച്ചിട്ട് പോലും ഇല്ല എന്നാണ് മനസ്സിലാക്കുന്നത്. കാരണം അത് പൂർണ്ണമായി വായിക്കാനായിട്ട് മെനക്കെട്ടിട്ടില്ല എന്നാണ് മനസ്സിലാക്കുന്നത്. അവരിൽ ഭൂരിഭാഗം പേരും തങ്ങളുടെ മനസ്സിലൊരു തീയതി ഉണ്ടാവും. ആ തീയതി മഹാഭാരതത്തിലെ തെളിവുകളെടുത്ത് ആ തീയതിക്ക് അവരുദ്ദേശിക്കുന്ന കാലഘട്ടത്തിന് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ തീയതിക്ക് വേണ്ടി അത് നിരത്തുന്ന ഒരു പ്രവണതയാണ് നമ്മൾ കാണുന്നത്. അത് കൃത്യമായ രീതിയിൽ മഹാഭാരതത്തിലുള്ള തെളിവുകൾ പൂർണ്ണമായി ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്ന ഒരു രീതി നമ്മൾ കാണുന്നില്ല എന്നുള്ളതാണ് അതിലെ ഒരു ന്യൂനത. ചില മഹാഭാരത തെളിവുകൾ അവരുടെ അവകാശവാദവുമായി എങ്ങനെ പൊരുത്തപ്പെടുന്നു എന്ന് കാണിക്കാൻ അവർ സൗകര്യമുള്ളിടത്ത് മഹാഭാരതത്തിന്റെ തെളിവുകൾ ഇടയ്ക്കിടെ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നു. മഹാഭാരത ഗവേഷകരിൽ ഭൂരിപക്ഷം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഭൂരിഭാഗം പേരും ഒരു ശാസ്ത്രീയമായ ഒരു നീതിശാസ്ത്രബോധമോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ശാസ്ത്രീയതയിലുള്ള മിടുക്കോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ യുക്തിസഹമായ ന്യായങ്ങളോ നിരത്താതെയാണ് ഈ തീയതികൾ മുന്നോട്ട് വയ്ക്കുന്നത് എന്നുള്ളതാണ് യാഥാർത്ഥ്യം. Nilesh, back to you.
Thank you. So I want to make three specific points in this particular presentation related to the dating of Mahabharata. And then to support those 3 points, I want to give 4-5 different specific examples from the Mahabharata text and how that evidence leads to a particular date. So 3 points that I want to make that every one of us must understand is that Mahabharata text, huge, right? The longest poem, longest epic of humanity, not just India, of humanity. Just to know the size, I'll tell you, if you take Greek epics, Iliad and Odyssey, their size, you combine it together and then you have to multiply it by 8. 8 times bigger than Iliad and Odyssey combined is what Mahabharata is. About 100,000, 1 laksha, ek laksha, 100,000 to 125,000 verses. That big is filled with evidence, okay, that can be tested, analyzed using different sciences, different hard sciences I'm talking, okay, such as astronomy, archaeology, oceanography, hydrology, genetics, physical anthropology, on and on. Of course, in this particular talk, because of the time limits also, and the very fact it's not visual, it's only auditory, I will still discuss at least 3 or 4 different disciplines of science. So that's point one. The second point is all this evidence, it's like a fits like a perfect pieces of jigsaw puzzle and jigsaw puzzle and a crossword puzzle together. And I'm going to give you now the answer that all scientific evidence this solved in this jigsaw puzzle fashion leads to a single and a unique date of 5561 BCE for the year of Mahabharata war. BCE refers to before common era. Okay, or if you're familiar with the BC and AD, those were the religious terms, like Christian terms, like before Christ and then after Christ, or Anno Domini, the year of our Lord kind of thing. But what the Jewish academics in America did, they said, hey, this is very specific to a specific religion and we don't want to accept that, we don't want to use it. So they turned that into common era CE, and BCE is a before common era. So the Mahabharata year is 5561 BCE. And if you want to know how many years ago, what we have to do is add 2022 of the common era. So that comes to 7,583 years ago. And if time permits, I'm also going to show beyond Mahabharata, if you refer to the appendix of Mahabharata like Harivamsha or some of the narrations about Krishna who come outside Mahabharata, like say Harivamsha, Bhagavad Puran, and so on. If you take evidence from there and combine that with the Mahabharata evidence, the additional bonus we get is a detailed lifespan account of Bhagwan Krishna. He was born 5633 BCE and he passed away, like we can say his nirvana, it's avatar, end of avatar, we can say 5525 BCE. It's the same time when Dwarka was flooded, and we'll talk about this. And in simplicity, if you want to remember this, all of this more than 7,000 years ago. The third point quickly, the reason, again, which I will not elaborate or belaborate much on that, is the reason 130 plus Mahabharata researchers cannot converge on one single date. It's very important all of you understand, because they don't use Mahabharata evidence to begin with. They don't use evidence to draw the date. They have a date in mind and they try to fit the evidence. That's not how science works. And they don't use all Mahabharata evidence. And also they lack scientific acumen and logical reasoning skills. Again, that's not a subject today, but it's literally humorous. It feels like a comedy when you see how they draw the inferences based on the so-called data or evidence they use. Ravishankarji, back to you.
താങ്ക് യു. ഈ ഒരു പശ്ചാത്തലം മുൻപ് പറഞ്ഞു നിർത്തിയെടുത്തുള്ളൊരു പശ്ചാത്തലം ഒരു പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട 3 പോയിന്റുകളിലൂടെ നമ്മൾ അവതരിപ്പിക്കാനാണ് ശ്രമിക്കുന്നത്. ഒന്ന്, ഈ ജ്യോതിശാസ്ത്രം, സമുദ്രശാസ്ത്രം, ജലശാസ്ത്രം, അതുപോലെ ജനിതക ശാസ്ത്രം എന്നിവയും അതിലെയും ഒരു മൾട്ടി ഡിസിപ്ലിനറി സയൻസുകൾ ഉപയോഗിച്ച് പരീക്ഷിക്കാനും വിശകലനം ചെയ്യാനും കഴിയുന്ന തെളിവുകളാൽ മഹാഭാരതം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ പാഠം നിറഞ്ഞു നിൽക്കുകയാണ്. കാരണം ഈ പറയുന്ന തെളിവുകളെല്ലാം പല മൾട്ടി ഡിസിപ്ലിനറി ആയിട്ടുള്ള സയൻസുകൾ ഉപയോഗിച്ച് അതിലെ തെളിവുകൾ നമുക്ക് അപഗ്രഥിക്കാൻ കഴിയുന്നതാണ്. അതാണ് ഒന്നാമത്തെ പോയിന്റ്. രണ്ടാമത്തത്, ഈ തെളിവുകളുടെ ശാസ്ത്രീയമായ പരിശോധന ഒരു കൃത്യമായ, അതായത് അർദ്ധശങ്കയ്ക്ക് ഇടയില്ലാത്ത രീതിയിൽ ഒരു തീയതിയിലേക്കാണ് നയിക്കുന്നത്. മഹാഭാരത യുദ്ധത്തിൻ്റെ വർഷമായ BC 5561 എന്ന് പറയുന്ന കൃത്യമായ ഒരു വർഷത്തിലേക്കാണ് ഈ തെളിവുകളെല്ലാം ചേർത്ത് പരിശോധിക്കുമ്പോൾ അത് നയിക്കുന്നത്. ഈ തെളിവുകൾ ശ്രീകൃഷ്ണൻ്റെ ജീവിതത്തെക്കുറിച്ചും പറയുന്നുണ്ട്. അത് 5633 BCE മുതൽ 5525 BCE വരെയാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ഇതെല്ലാം ഏതാണ്ടൊരു 7500 വർഷങ്ങൾക്ക് മുൻപ് നടന്ന സംഭവങ്ങളാണ് ചരിത്രപരമായി. ഇനി മൂന്നാമത്തെ പോയിന്റ്, ഏതാണ്ട് 130-ലധികം മഹാഭാരത ഗവേഷകർ ഉള്ളതായിട്ട് നമ്മൾ നേരത്തെ പറഞ്ഞു. അവർക്ക് ഈ തീയതിയിൽ എത്തിച്ചേരാൻ കഴിയാത്തതിൻ്റെ കാരണം അവർ മഹാഭാരതത്തിലെ അവൈലബിൾ ആയിട്ടുള്ള എല്ലാ തെളിവുകളും ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നില്ല എന്നുള്ളത് കൊണ്ടും കൃത്യമായ ശാസ്ത്രീയമായിട്ടുള്ള മെത്തേഡുകൾ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ശാസ്ത്രീയമായ വിധാനങ്ങൾ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നുമില്ല, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിൽ പൂർണ്ണമായി യുക്തി ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നില്ല എന്നതുകൊണ്ടും ആയിരിക്കാവുന്നതാണ്. നിലേഷ്, ബാക്ക് ടു യു.
Thank you. So now what we are going to do, I'm going to walk you through specific demonstrations of Mahabharata evidence. Now this has to do with how I began. Now if we take scientific method, when somebody proposes a new theory, like say Kepler proposed a theory, Copernicus proposed a theory. Copernicus said, you know what, Ptolemy is saying Earth is at the center, but actually I would like to say that maybe the sun is at the center. And Kepler said the orbits of the planets are not circular, but they are elliptical. Then the data fits better. Newton said, you know what, the way these planets are rotating around, that the science behind it is not any different than when we throw a stone at a tree and the way the stone travels. So they try to bring this together. But why, how do they come up with this? Or why do they even do this research? Because they have some unsolved tough problem in front of them. That's how the research should begin. Again, I'll just mention, if you ask, if you are familiar with other names, Mahabharata researchers who have come up with these different dates, if you ask them, so what was your motivation, what was your curiosity, what started this all research? And after this, if you know somebody and if you ask them, do send me their answers, or to Ravishankar ji, and he can forward it to me. You'll find a surprise and a shock on their face. They would say, what do you mean? Like I said, hey, everyone is doing Mahabharata dating, let me also do it. And they will give some other answer too, but they will not able to tell you what the tough problem they were working on. I will tell you how my journey began. So I'm going to start with the first one. It's now become very famous. Okay, Arundhati Vasishtha observation. In fact, among the Mahabharata researchers, what you will find is, whether they like it or not, they have to talk about it. And why do they talk about it? Because the evidence is such an amazing, powerful evidence. In science, we call it crucial evidence, crucial experiment. Why is that? I'm going to briefly explain it to you. Just before the Mahabharata war began, uh, Vasudev came to Dhritarashtra and made a last minute attempt to stop the war. Just like Bhagwan Krishna had tried the same thing long time before, like a month before that. Vasudev tells Dhritarashtra, see, the war is, nobody really wants the war. There are some very tough signs I'm seeing this, so think again. And of course, Dhritarashtra does not listen. But in this conversation, Vasudev gives a long list of different things he's observing at that time. One of the things that he said, and I'll just quote for fun this Sanskrit verse. This comes in the Bhishma Parva of Mahabharata, second chapter, sorry, 31st verse. या चैषा विस्तृता राजस्त्रैलोके साधु सम्मता Arundhati Taya Pesha Vashishta Prushtata Pruta. Vyasa tells Dhritarashtra that, my dear king, I'm seeing many signs. One of the thing I'm going to tell you is that Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta. Now he is referring to stars, two stars, very famous stars. Most of Indians should know about them. These days we are not taught this, so some of you may not know. Part of the Saptarshi. And he says Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta. Now, why is this crucial evidence? It is crucial evidence because in our times, if you at night time you go and look at the Arundhati Vasishta, right now they will be almost like on the top of your head by like a 9 o'clock or so at night in a northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere you will not able to see them. What you will see is that Vasishta is walking ahead of Arundhati. Now, for that you need a basic knowledge of astronomy, which I'm assuming it, or you will study. Now, if you go back 1,000 years, still Vasishta is ahead. If you go back 2,000 years, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years, astronomy speak, still Vasishta will be seen ahead of Arundhati. But Vyasadeva is saying at the time of Mahabharata war, it was Arundhati which was walking ahead of Vasishta, and that is what I found as the unsolved problem. Nobody, no other Mahabharata researcher, when I started studying on this, it was 1995, and no other Mahabharata researcher has answered this question. I'm a chemical engineer by profession, and you know what I thought? This must be easy. Over a one weekend I will do it. Then it took me 15 years to solve it. But the great outcome of that is when finally I solved, and astronomically I showed why Arundhati would be seen walking ahead of Vasishta, but also when Arundhati would be seen walking ahead of Vasishta. It gives us a approximate time period of 5,000 years. Simplicity, I will say from 10,000 BCE, which is about 12,000 years ago, to 4636 or 4500 BCE, which is 6,500 years ago. So only between that middle time, from 10,000 BC to 4500 BC, this one evidence is telling that Mahabharata war is possible. It can only happen between these two dates based on the particular evidence and its scientific testing. Ravishankar ji.
ഞാൻ പറയുന്നത് കേൾക്കാമെന്ന്
Hello.
പ്രതീക്ഷിക്കുന്നു. ഞാൻ പറയാം.
Yeah, go ahead.
നിലേഷ് ജി പറഞ്ഞത്, അതായത് ഈ തെളിവുകളുടെ അടിസ്ഥാനമായിട്ട് വരുന്നത് ചില മഹാഭാരതത്തിൽ തന്നെയുള്ള ആസ്ട്രോണമിക്കലായിട്ടുള്ള ഒബ്സർവേഷൻസ് ആണ്. അതിൽ ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ടത് അരുന്ധതി വസിഷ്ഠൻ്റെ നിരീക്ഷണമാണ്. അതായത് മഹാഭാരത യുദ്ധം തുടങ്ങുന്നതിന് മുൻപ് വ്യാസഭഗവാൻ ധൃതരാഷ്ട്ര അടുത്ത് വന്ന് കുറച്ച് ശകുനങ്ങളെ പറ്റി പറയുന്നുണ്ട്. അതിൽ ഒരെണ്ണമായിരുന്നു അരുന്ധതി വസിഷ്ഠൻ്റെ ഈ ഒരു ശകുനം. അത് അപ്പോൾ പറഞ്ഞത് അരുന്ധതി വസിഷ്ഠന് മുന്നിലൂടെ നടക്കുന്നു ആ ഒരു സമയത്ത് എന്നാണ് അവിടെ പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നത്. അത് വലിയ വിനാശങ്ങൾക്ക് കാരണമാകുന്നു എന്നാണ് പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നത്. ആ ഒരു ഒബ്സർവേഷൻ പല ശാസ്ത്രജ്ഞർക്കും അത് സോൾവ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് സാധിച്ചിരുന്നില്ല. നൈലേഷ് ജി തന്നെ അത് പെട്ടെന്ന് സോൾവ് ചെയ്യാമെന്ന് വിചാരിച്ചു. എങ്കിലും ഏതാണ്ട് 15 വർഷത്തോളം എടുത്താണ് അത് ആ ഒരു പ്രശ്നം സോൾവ് ചെയ്തത്. അത് അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ബുക്കിൽ വളരെ വിശദമായിട്ട് പറയുന്നുണ്ട്. ആ അരുന്ധതി മുന്നിൽ നടക്കുന്ന ആ ഒരു പ്രതിഭാസം ഏതാണ്ട് ഒരു 5000 വർഷമാണ് അങ്ങനെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നത്. അത് 10,000 BCE മുതൽ ഏതാണ്ട് 4500 BCE വരെ ആ ഒരു പ്രതിഭാസം നടന്നിരുന്നു. അപ്പോൾ ആ ഒരു പ്രതിഭാസം നടക്കുന്ന കാലത്തെ മഹാഭാരതം നടന്നിരിക്കാൻ കഴിയൂ എന്നുള്ളതാണ് അതിലെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട കാര്യം. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഭീഷ്മ നിർവ്വാണം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഗ്രഹങ്ങളുടെ തെളിവുകൾ, ദ്വാരകയെപ്പറ്റി പറയാം. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ജനിതകവും ഭൗതികവുമായ നരവംശാസ്ത്രത്തെപ്പറ്റി പറയാം. കംസനെ വധിച്ചിരുന്ന ആ ഒരു കാലഘട്ടം, ഇതെല്ലാം ഇതിനോട് ചേർന്ന് വരേണ്ടതാണ്. Nilesh, back to you.
Thank you. And so, as Ravishankar ji explained, and that's what I was telling others, especially again, there are folks whose Malayalam is not a mother tongue. Like, for example, what he said, of course, because I know what he's going to talk about, like he's translating what I'm saying. But it was very interesting that I could understand what he was saying, including, like, the last summary that he gave is not what I had said, but he gave a summary and I could understand each word of it. Okay. So he said, hey, this is what I'm going to go through. And that's the next point I'm going to say. Now, this particular observation, Again, in science, to solve a tough problem, we propose a solution, and the solution is what we call theory. For example, Copernicus said sun is at the center. Kepler said the orbits are not circular but elliptical. Newton said, when two bodies with the masses like inertia, there is always attractive force between them, and so on, right? So that these what I just said are the theory statements of their theories. Similarly, what is my statement for what I just showed you, or what I'm going to tell you afterwards? For all astronomy evidence, my scientific theoretical statement for my claim is that all astronomy descriptions, evidence of Mahabharata text, is astronomy observations of the time of the Mahabharata war, of Mahabharata times. That's my theory. So let's go to the next one. Now, Bhishma Nirvana. So now I looked at a Bhishma Nirvana evidence. Again, I will not take you to the details. If we get into question answer, we will talk some details. But Bhishma Nirvana evidence, now forget Arundhati Vasishta for a minute. Forget meaning don't throw it away. This is very important. Then I started looking at the Bhishma Nirvana evidence. Just to give you a quick background, number of you would know this, but Mahabharata war lasted for 18 days. The first day when it began, for the first 10 days, Bhishma was the warrior general from the Kaurava side, okay, military general from Kaurava side. And on the 10th day, he fell in the battle. Now, he had certain siddhi because of which he could control the timing of his death. He cannot avoid death, but he can control the timing of his death. And based on the rules or assumptions of that time, it was considered, and you can see that in Bhagavad Gita also, by the way, it's a metaphorically stated, is that it is preferred to die during the Uttarayan, meaning, in our times, I would say that's like, say, from 21st December to 21st June, that time is considered. Now, don't take this guys seriously, these are metaphorical in nature. My point is, so he looks at it, the war is happening during the Sharad Rutu. Okay, so in our times, if you want to think of it like a September 21st plus minus 1 month. That is the time. And so Mahabharata war is happening more like a beginning of a September, just from a weather perspective or season perspective of our times. Now, when I looked at the Bhishma Nirvana evidence, I found it again very fascinating, something very fascinating. Now, what was my samshay there? Because rest of the Mahabharata researchers, majority of them, either they were not talking about the duration of Bhishma on the bed of arrows, Sharashaya, or they were always trying to justify wrong number of duration, wrong number of days, namely 58. When I started reading Mahabharata multiple times just to figure this out, I found there is no evidence for 58. In fact, all the evidence says that Bhishma was on the bed of arrows for more than 90 to 95 days. Now, this is just a basic information. When you combine that in astronomy sense, like which was the month of the war, like Margashirsha, what was the Rutu, the season of the Mahabharata war, actual days. When you combine that and connect it with astronomy, what you find is just a very simple back of the envelope calculation tells you that Mahabharata war definitely happened around 8,000 years ago. Or you can even do the precise calculation and say Mahabharata war happened sometime between 5000 BC and 7000 BC, not before 7000 BC, not any time after 5000 BC. Ravishankar ji.
അദ്ദേഹം ഇപ്പോൾ പറഞ്ഞത് ഭീഷ്മ നിർവ്വഹണത്തെ പറ്റിയിട്ടാണ്. അതായത് ഭീഷ്മർ സ്വച്ഛന്ത മൃത്യുവായ ഒരാളായിരുന്നു നമുക്കറിയാം. അദ്ദേഹം ശരശയ്യയിൽ കിടക്കുന്ന സമയത്തും അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് ഇഷ്ടമുള്ള സമയത്തെ ഉത്തരായനം വരുന്നത് വരെ അദ്ദേഹം കാത്തു കിടക്കുകയാണ് ചെയ്തത്. അപ്പോൾ അദ്ദേഹം ഈ ശരം കൊണ്ട് വീണ് ശരശയ്യയിലാവുന്ന സമയം തൊട്ടിട്ട് അദ്ദേഹം മരിക്കുന്ന സമയം വരെയുള്ള ആ ഒരു കാലഘട്ടം, അതിൻ്റെ സമയം കൃത്യമായിട്ട് എത്ര ദിവസം എന്നുള്ളത് കൃത്യമായിട്ട് കാൽക്കുലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട്, അത് കണക്ക് കൂട്ടാനായിട്ട് പലർക്കും സാധിച്ചിരുന്നില്ല. അപ്പോൾ അതും ഈ പറയുന്ന പോലെ ജ്യോതിശാസ്ത്രപരമായ പല കാര്യങ്ങൾ കൊണ്ടാണ് നമ്മൾ ആ ഒരു ദിവസത്തെ കണക്കാക്കുന്നത്. അത് കൃത്യമായി ഇപ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് കണക്കാക്കാനായിട്ട് സാധിച്ചു. ഇത്ര ദിവസം എന്നുള്ളത് കൃത്യമായിട്ട് കൊണ്ടുവരാനായിട്ട് സാധിച്ചു. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ഉത്തരായനം എന്നുള്ള ആ ഒരു സങ്കേതം അവിടെ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നുമുണ്ട്. കാരണം ഉത്തരായനത്തിലേക്ക് വരുന്ന സമയത്താണ് അദ്ദേഹം ജീവൻ വെടിയുന്നത്. അത് എത്ര ദിവസം എന്നുള്ളത് ഇപ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് കാൽക്കുലേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് കണക്ക് കൂട്ടി നമുക്കതിനൊരു കൃത്യമായത് പറയാൻ സാധിച്ചു. അപ്പോൾ ആ ഒരു ഇത്ര ദിവസം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇത് പറയുന്നത് 6700 BCക്കും 5100 ബി സിക്കും ഇടയിലുള്ള ഒരു സമയത്തെ ആവാനായിട്ട് സാധിക്കൂ എന്നുള്ളത് നമുക്ക് വളരെ കൃത്യമായി ശാസ്ത്രീയമായി തെളിയിക്കാനായിട്ട് സാധിക്കും. നിലേഷ്, ബാക്ക് ടു യു.
Thank you. And now we should ask the question. So yes, it happened sometime after 10,000 BC, before 4500 BC, based on Arundhati Vasishta observation, or based on a Bhishma Nirvana evidence. I should also mention the Nate total Bhishma Nirvana evidence is actually almost practically infinite, but for practical from Mahabharata itself, because like these are like chapters after chapters and parva after parva, right from Bhishma Parva, or even you can go back to Udyog Parva, Bhishma Parva, Drona Parva, Karna Parva, Shalya Parva, Sautik Parva, Stri Parva, Shanti Parva, Anushasan Parva, Ashwamedha Parva, Ashramvasika Parva. I mean, the evidence related to Bhishma Nirvana is there everywhere. Okay, especially Anushasan up to Anushasan Parva from Udyog Parva. But actually, that much evidence is not required. Only 3 pieces of evidence, 6 pieces of evidence are sufficient. But I have found 100 plus pieces of evidence for Bhishma Parva. Now, why did I find this? Because when I presented only 3 pieces of evidence, the other Mahabharata researchers started finding some kind of doubt. You know, it's not intelligent doubt, it's not logical doubt, but some doubt. And again, ordinary people may not know what to make of it. So to answer that question, I brought additional evidence. Then it became 23. Then they asked more questions and some more, artificial doubts. So then I brought additional evidence. Then it became 60, and now it's 100 and 200. So there is a huge evidence. That's one point. Now the question comes. So okay, we know that Mahabharata war happened between 5000 BC and 7000 BC, but we have to still find the exact year. How did I find that? That came from the Graha evidence or planetary evidence. Mahabharata text has 50 plus 50 50 different descriptions of planets. And keep in mind, both Western astronomy and Eastern Indian astronomy, planets includes all the 5 visible planets, also sun and moon. If you see Copernicus and all that, you'll see they were also working on the motions of the sun and the moon. And also now we of course know Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Okay, so all that evidence, think of it as solving like a jigsaw puzzle, solving like a crossword puzzle. When we do this, and this is very fascinating. In fact, I was in Kerala at what is that place, Velianad, Arnakulam, and I taught, this is 2018, I taught a 5-day long summer workshop on astronomy evidence of Mahabharata, the planetary evidence. And what I'm just this saying this one line, planetary evidence, 50 evidence, we were discussing this for 5 days and still we could not finish it. So I want to give you a summary of it. Think of it as a jigsaw puzzle. When solved it, and we don't need all 50 evidence. In fact, we can use only 7 pieces of evidence or 10 pieces of evidence, and such it takes you to 5561 BCE. But very important, all 50 pieces of evidence also match for 5561 BCE as the year of Mahabharat war. Ravishankar ji.
അദ്ദേഹം ആദ്യം പറഞ്ഞ 2 തെളിവുകൾ, അരുന്ധതി വസിഷ്ഠന്റെ നിരീക്ഷണം, അതിന് ഒരു വലിയൊരു കാലഘട്ടം പറഞ്ഞു. 10,000 ബി സി മുതൽ 4500 ബി സി എന്നുള്ളൊരു വലിയൊരു കാലഘട്ടം പറഞ്ഞു. അതിനുശേഷം ഭീഷ്മ നിർവ്വാണം എന്നുള്ളൊരു കാര്യത്തെപ്പറ്റി പറഞ്ഞു. അത് 6700 തൊട്ടിട്ട് 5100 ബി സി വരെയുള്ള സമയം പറഞ്ഞു. ഇത് രണ്ടും വലിയൊരു കാലഘട്ടമാണ്. അതിൽ നിന്ന് നമുക്ക് കൃത്യമായൊരു ഒരു ഡേറ്റിലേക്ക്, ഒരു തീയതിയിലേക്ക് വരുന്നത് ഗ്രഹങ്ങളെ സംബന്ധിച്ച തെളിവുകളെ കൊണ്ടാണ്. അത് മഹാഭാരതത്തിൽ തന്നെ ഏതാണ്ട് 50ഓളം ഗ്രഹങ്ങളെ സംബന്ധിച്ച തെളിവുകൾ മഹാഭാരതത്തിലുണ്ട്. ഉടനീളം നമുക്കത് കാണാനായിട്ട് സാധിക്കും. അത് ഒരു നെല്ലശ്ശിയുടെ വാക്കുകൾ ഉപയോഗിക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഒരു ജിക്സോ പസിൽ പോലെ കൃത്യമായി നമുക്ക് അടുക്കി വയ്ക്കാവുന്നൊരു സീക്വൻസിൽ കൊണ്ടുവരാവുന്നൊരു സമയത്ത് മാത്രമേ അത് നടക്കുകയുള്ളൂ എന്നുള്ളത് നമുക്ക് മനസ്സിലാക്കാനായിട്ട് സാധിക്കും. ഈ 50ൽ കുറച്ച് തെളിവുകൾ എടുത്ത് അത് മാച്ച് ചെയ്യുന്ന, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിന് യോജിക്കുന്ന ഒരു തീയതി കണ്ടുപിടിക്കുക എന്നല്ല, മറിച്ച് ഈ 50ഉം നമുക്ക് കൃത്യമായ ഒരു കാലഘട്ടത്തിൽ അത് നിരത്തി വെക്കാനായിട്ട് സാധിച്ചാൽ അതായിരിക്കും അതിന് കൃത്യമായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു തീയതി വരുന്നത്. അങ്ങനെ വരുന്ന തീയതി 5561 ബി സി എന്നതാണ് മഹാഭാരത യുദ്ധം നടക്കുന്ന കാലഘട്ടമായിട്ട് അനുമാനിക്കുന്നത്. നിലേഷ്, ബാക്ക് ടു യു.
Thank you. Now, so Mahabharat year happened in 55, I mean, Mahabharat war happened in 5561 BCE. Now, how did I decide this? Based on a astronomy evidence from the Mahabharata text. At this point, when I published my work in 2011, Then people started asking me these questions, but I also had my own questions. I mean, my own curiosity, not questions in the sense of a doubt, but in the sense of curiosity, fascination. I said, great. So, astronomy evidence is more powerful, especially if it's available in abundance, which is the case in Mahabharata and also Ramayana. That you cannot go and play around with the stars. You cannot just move them. Archaeology evidence, you might able to move it, play around with it, do some mischief. You cannot do that with astronomy stars in the sky. You cannot make them move to your wish. So that was very powerful. But the question I wanted to ask, the curiosity you may say, is great. So now if the Mahabharata war happened in 5561 BCE, 7500 years ago, is there any evidence, like archaeology type of evidence on the ground, like Galileo said celestial is equal to terrestrial, the way same you see up in the sky, same on the ground. And you see that in the Mahabharata grantha. To explain a celestial phenomena, some nakshatra phenomenon, they tell the story. Vyasadev or his disciples tell the story like our ordinary story in the Hindi movie or Malayali movie. On the other hand, to describe a physical event such as a war or some two warriors fighting or things like that, Vyasadev describes this by using the analogy Upaman of the stars or planets in the sky. So I said, is there any evidence on the ground? And quickly I'll mention the evidence for Dwarka. Now, what Mahabharata tells us is that Krishna's Dwarka was flooded by the seawater and was destroyed 36 years after the Mahabharata war. So now that Mahabharata war happened in 5561 BCE, if you add 36 years to it, now be careful because we are talking before Common Era, right? So when you add 36, the number that comes up is actually 5525 BCE. Okay, because we are coming towards us, like in the the arrow of time. So after 36 years from 5561 is 5525 BCE. That is a prediction. Okay, prediction for the flooding and destruction of Dwarka. And I wanted to see if there is a archaeology evidence on the ground for this. And to my surprise, and I have given many talks on it, if you go to Sangam Talks, you may watch, just type Nilesh and Dwarka or something like this, you're going to find easily 4 or 5 talks. I'm going to summarize that. There is enormous evidence around the world, but there is like 8 distinct evidence. The evidence is so powerful, so crisp and clear. Okay, it's very easy to understand. Out of those 8, I'm going to mention 3 or 4. For example, let me start far away from India. The event, whatever that flooding or the ocean level rise, it was so significant and amazing that it happened. Although it was most significant near Dwarka, you can see the effect of that sea level rise even as far as West Indies, okay, Caribbean. The person is Professor Paul Blanchard, okay, and Professor John Shaw. And I know both of them. They Professor Paul Blanchard was doing a PhD in University of Alberta in Canada when I was doing my master's in chemical engineering. He was doing PhD in geology. And what research that he has done in the Caribbean area, that what he showed, 7 different locations and evidence for sudden sea level rise of 6.5 meters. So if you just convert that into feet, if you like to do that, like say 20 feet, approximately 20 feet, sudden sea level rise in Caribbean. And do you know when? 5525 BCE. So that's evidence number 1. Now you will say, what to do with this evidence from Caribbean? Come on, Dwarka is far away, right? India. Now let's come to Dwarka. But before we come to Dwarka from West Indies, let's take a quick stop uh, near Istanbul in Turkey. Number of you would have heard Black Sea. Black Sea as a saltwater sea simply did not exist until 5525 BCE. Again, the sea level rise that suddenly happened around the world. The Atlantic water went into the Mediterranean, Mediterranean went into the Aegean Sea, into Sea of Marmara, and finally it broke that Bosphorus channel. And what was a sweetwater lake, now that's the Black Sea, instantaneously turned into a saltwater sea. This is a work of Columbia geologists, Ryan and Pittman. So that is another evidence. Now let's come to Dwarka. Most fascinating evidence. in 5525 BCE in Dwarka, we have a evidence, in Arabian Sea, we have a evidence of sudden sea level rise of 23 meters. Okay, very important you pay attention, not feet. That's like what? Almost 50 feet plus. Okay, sudden sea level rise, and that's what destroyed Krishna's Dwarka. Now, one more point I will add. Again, I said there is more data, but on the east coast in Tamil Nadu coast, what you find is sudden sea ingression. Sea water came gushing in, and if you know, if you've been to Tamil Nadu, it's pretty flat. It gushing in all the way to Mayuram, from Pumpuhar all the way to Mayuram, inside 10-15 kilometers between this 6000 and 4000 BCE, and stayed there for 2000 years, which is the same case on the Dwarka side also. And then only it went back to where Pumpuhar is today. And one last piece of evidence, which is also important to destroy and remove and eliminate and falsify all other claims for the Mahabharata year, which are claimed around 3000 BCE. Guess what? This evidence from Indonesia, peer-reviewed paper published in 2018 or maybe 20, it shows a perfect evidence for 5525 BCE. Okay, but then what is interesting is, in fact, it shows evidence that there was no sea level rising from 3500 BCE to 1500 BCE. So anyone who is claiming a date for Mahabharata war between 3500 BCE to 1500 BCE, and there are at least like 100 people there, they cannot show how destruction of Krishna's Dwarka happened. Ravishankar ji, back to you.
യെസ്. അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞത്, നമ്മളിപ്പോൾ സംസാരിച്ചത് ഇത്രയും ഗ്രഹങ്ങളെ സംബന്ധിച്ച തെളിവുകളെ പറ്റിയിട്ടാണ്. അങ്ങനെ ഗ്രഹങ്ങളെ പറ്റിയുള്ള തെളിവുകളെ മറ്റും മാത്രമല്ല, മഹാഭാരതത്തിൽ അല്ലാതെയുള്ള തെളിവുകളും ഉണ്ടെന്ന് നമ്മൾ പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നു. അതിലൊന്ന് ഈ പറയുന്നത് എന്താ പറയുന്നത്, ഭൗതികശാസ്ത്രീയപരമായ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഭൗതികശാസ്ത്രീയപരമല്ല, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ജോഗ്രഫിക്കലായ ഒരു കാര്യമാണ്. അത് ദ്വാരകയെ പറ്റിയിട്ടാണ്. ദ്വാരക മഹാഭാരതത്തിൽ തന്നെ പറയുന്നുണ്ട്. ഏതാണ് ഈ മഹാഭാരത യുദ്ധം കഴിഞ്ഞ് ഏതാണ്ട് 36 വർഷത്തിന് ശേഷം ഈ ദ്വാരക കടലെടുത്ത് പോയി എന്ന് മഹാഭാരതത്തിൽ തന്നെ നമ്മൾ വായിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ ആ ഒരു കാര്യവും നമുക്ക് ഇന്ന് അവൈലബിൾ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ശാസ്ത്രീയപരമായ തെളിവുകൾക്കനുസരിച്ച് അതും ഇതിനോടുകൂടി ചേർത്ത് വയ്ക്കാൻ കഴിയേണ്ടതാണ്. ഈ പറയുന്ന കാലഘട്ടം 5561 BCE എന്ന് പറയുന്ന കാലഘട്ടം ശരിയാണ് എങ്കിൽ. അപ്പോൾ അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞത് അതിന് 3 തെളിവുകൾ, ഏതാണ്ട് 8ഓളം തെളിവുകൾ ഉണ്ട്. അതിൽ 3 തെളിവുകളാണ് പറഞ്ഞത്. അതായത് ഈ പറയുന്ന ദ്വാരക കടലെടുത്ത് പോകുന്ന സമയത്ത് പെട്ടെന്ന്, വളരെ പെട്ടെന്ന് കടൽ വെള്ളം ഉയർന്നു വന്നിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു പ്രതിഭാസം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അത് ദ്വാരകയിൽ മാത്രമല്ല, ലോകത്തിൻ്റെ പല ഭാഗത്തും ആ ഒരു പ്രതിഭാസം കാണപ്പെട്ടിരുന്നു. അങ്ങനെയുള്ളൊരു 3 കാര്യങ്ങളാണ് പറഞ്ഞത്. അതിലാദ്യം പറഞ്ഞത് കരീബിയൻ ഐലൻഡ്സിൻ്റെ കാര്യമാണ് പറഞ്ഞത്. അവിടെ ഏതാണ്ട് 6.5 മീറ്റർ വെള്ളം ഉയർന്നിരുന്നു. അത് ഗവേഷകരുടെ പേര് അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നു ഇവിടെ. അത് ഒന്നാമത്തെ തെളിവ്. രണ്ടാമത്തത് നമുക്ക് അറിയാം, ഇസ്താംബുളിൽ അടുത്തുള്ള ഒരു ശുദ്ധജല തടാകം, ഇന്ന് നമ്മൾ ബ്ലാക്ക് സീ എന്ന പേരിലാണ് അറിയപ്പെടുന്നത്. പണ്ട് അതൊരു ശുദ്ധജല തടാകമായിരുന്നു. അത് അവിടെയും ഇതേപോലെയുള്ള വെള്ളം ഉയർന്നു വരുന്ന, അതായത് കടൽ വെള്ളം ഉയർന്നു വരുന്ന ആ ഒരു സമയം കൊണ്ട് ഈ ശുദ്ധജല തടാകത്തിലേക്ക് കടൽ വെള്ളം കയറുകയും അതൊരു ഉപ്പുജല തടാകമായിട്ട് മാറുകയും ചെയ്തിരുന്നു. അതും രണ്ടാമത്തെ തെളിവാണ്. മൂന്നാമത്തെ തെളിവ് പറഞ്ഞത് ദ്വാരകയുടെ തന്നെയാണ്. ദ്വാരകയിൽ ഏതാണ്ട് 50 അടിയോളം വെള്ളം ഉയരുകയാണ് ചെയ്തത്. കാരണം ഈ കടൽ വെള്ളം ഉയർന്നത് എല്ലാ ഭാഗത്തും, ലോകത്തിൻ്റെ എല്ലാ ഭാഗത്തും ഒരേ തരത്തിലായിരുന്നില്ല, പല രീതിയിലായിരുന്നു. തമിഴ്നാട്ടിലും ഇതേപോലെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. തമിഴ്നാട്ടിലും വെള്ളം ഉയർന്നിരുന്നു. അത് ഏതാണ്ട് കയറി വരികയും വളരെയധികം 12,000ഓളം വർഷം അത് അവിടെ നിൽക്കുകയും പിന്നീട് ഇറങ്ങിപ്പോവുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നൊരു പ്രതിഭാസം ഉണ്ടായതായിട്ട് അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞു. ദ്വാരകയിൽ ഏതാണ്ട് 50 അടിയോളം ഉയരത്തിൽ വെള്ളം പൊങ്ങി. അങ്ങനെയാണ് ദ്വാരക എന്നുള്ള നഗരം കടലിനടിയിലേക്ക് പോയത്. നിലേഷ്, ബാക്ക് ടു യു. അത് രണ്ടും ഈ പറയുന്ന 5525 എന്നുള്ള കൃത്യമായ ഒരു വർഷത്തിലാണ് നമുക്ക് ബാഹ്യമായ തെളിവുകളുടെ അടിസ്ഥാനത്തിൽ നമുക്ക് കൃത്യമായിട്ട് അത് പറയാനായിട്ട് സാധിക്കും. നിലേഷ്, യു ക്യാൻ അൺമ്യൂട്ട് ആൻഡ് കണ്ടിന്യൂ.
I am unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. I thought if I'm unmuted, then I'm trouble. Okay. All right. So we talked about astronomy evidence, and what I just now described is a oceanography evidence. In fact, if you understand a broader definition of archaeological evidence, then you must understand all of this is actually archaeology evidence. For example, the astronomy evidence I described is called known as archaeoastronomy. The oceanography evidence that I talked about is a archaeooceanography, you can say. Okay, then for example, I'm not going to discuss today, but just like I'm discussing, I'm going to discuss one more discipline of science, namely genetics. That will be archaeogenetics. Okay, and it's very fascinating, and I hope you find it fascinating. But there is no limit of this evidence. If you go to hydrology, like the waters in the different rivers, morphodynamics of rivers, how rivers change their paths, like our Saraswati, the Saraswati described in the Mahabharata times, Saraswati described in Ramayana times, Saraswati described in Vedic times. In fact, because I'm at that point and today that's not the subject, but I'll tell you. So Ramayana, just like I'm explaining you Mahabharata evidence, I also did this for Ramayana and showed that Ramayana happened more than 14,000 years ago. And then this Saraswati river evidence, because the astronomy evidence I couldn't find, at least at that time 5 years ago, that would help me decide the dating of Rigveda per se. But I said that some portions of Rigveda are definitely older than 21,000 years ago. So quick formula also I want to talk about is the multiplication of 7. And if there is one takeaway that I want all of you to take away today, is that from today onwards, assuming you are convinced of what I'm saying and you spend some time studying this, if somebody asks you how old is Indian civilization, you should not give the lazy and a tamasic and a wrong answer saying 5,000 years ago. No, that's utterly nonsensical, lazy answer. We used it until now, that's okay. But we should tell everyone that we know, including our educators and politicians and everyone, that they should, with full conviction and confidence, start saying that our civilization is definitely more than 21,000 years old, 24,000 years old. Okay, so that's one takeaway. Now, there are many different sciences, as I mentioned: hydrology, geology, geophysics, geochemistry, oceanography, we already did, climatology, that's called paleoclimates, paleobotany, paleontology, like, elephants with four tusks in Ramayana times. Again, that's not a subject today. All the evidence, if the evidence exists, I have shown that it perfectly matches in the context of Mahabharata for 5561 BC, in the context of Ramayana for 12,209 BC. But one more evidence I want to cover, and we will kind of summarize it. I'll make one summary conclusions, and then we'll get into question answers. Just like I discussed astronomy, just like I discussed oceanography, now I want to discuss archaeogenetics. This is also archaeology evidence because many people don't understand this. That's why I'm emphasizing it. Many people think only finding pots and pan, digging the soil and finding something, and that's only archaeology. Not so. If you go and understand the definition of archaeology, you see how much it has evolved. But some people are still stuck into that logical positivism, and you can ignore it. This is a more philosophical discussion of only finding pots and pans and some fossilized object. That is also archaeology, but what we are discussing is also archaeology. The last point I'm going to say is the genetics data, and please pay attention. This is our last point as far as the data is concerned. It's very fascinating, which is this. Again, you need some basic knowledge of Mahabharata, and number of you would definitely have it. For example, as you may remember, the Mahabharata war happened for 18 days, and you may or may not know this, but the different warriors who participated into the war came from greater India, not the India we know today. Now we have lost many parts. How many of you immediately think when you think of Afghanistan as India? How many of you think of Iran as India? How many of you think of Iraq as India? Not as a nation state, but as a civilizational state, meaning Janapadas. That is all the way to Turkey, Mitannis and those, and to Syria. Syrian people call themselves Surya. They call their dish like Surya as in sun. Okay, very fascinating. If you go to the north, now parts of Uzbekistan, east of Caspian Sea, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, western part of China. Now what is China? Tibet. Okay, then you go to Bangladesh and Myanmar, which is Burma, Brahmadesh, right? And go further to Thailand and Indonesia. I mean, Cambodia and Vietnam and even Philippines. Those were all Indian civilization. And the warriors in the Mahabharata times came from all these regions. Okay, so that's point number one. Second, if you remember, there was a unit of the warriors, those who fought. It's called 8 Aukshahini. Like think of that as a battalion in our modern times, but different number, but a unit of military formation. Aukshahini. 18 Aukshahini warriors fought. 11 Aukshahini on the Kaurava side, 7 Aukshahini on the Pandava side. If you use the Mahabharata descriptions to count the number of warriors, that comes to about 4 million people. Now, 4 million people we have to put in the context of the population of the 7,500 years ago Mahabharata times. Now, what are our estimates? The estimate tells us the population of the world, human population of the world in 6th millennium BC, 5561 BC, that time was around 5 to 20 million. For simplicity, we will take the highest number, 20 million people. Now, the population from say Syria, Turkey, all the way to Indonesia, Cambodia, Vietnam, the area of India and who participated in Mahabharata war. Let's take half of it. Most of it is around the equator, so we are taking half of the equatorial area. So let's take 10 million. Now, out of 10 million, 5 million approximately would be women, 5 million would be men. And of course, there are old people, young people, and so on. But let's simplify. Now, if you take the population of male population from the area which fought in the Mahabharata war, out of that 10 million, it comes to 5 million. Now realize that Mahabharata tells you that 4 million exclusive men fought for 18 days and most of them died. 99% of them died. That is what Mahabharata shows us. So what has happened? Out of the 10 million, 4 million men are gone, 1 million men are say left. So that is a ratio of female to male ratio is of 5:1. Now this is a population ratio. But those of you who understand genetics, the genetic Y chromosome that will be there propagated into the future race of mankind of that area will also have, at least for some time, a 5:1 female to male diversity ratio in the genetics. Now this is based purely on the population estimates based on our modern science, and population estimates number of people died, men died in the Mahabharata from Mahabharata descriptions. So keep this in mind as a background knowledge. Now I come to my main point. In 2015, a genetics research paper was published in a peer reviewed journal. The main author of that was Monica Carmin. 2015, like 7 years ago. Do you know what it talks about? It talks about a bottleneck occurring, meaning suddenly something happened to male chromosome, like male genetic diversity. Suddenly that diversity went down so much, it was like a crash, to the extent on the absolute ratio there was a female diversity ratio to male diversity ratio of 16:1, or if you take as a signal to noise ratio, relative ratio, it was a 4:1 or 5:1, like 16 divided by 4 or 16 divided by 3, or 15 divided by 3. So 4:1 or 5:1. Now, does that ring a bell? Like I said, if we take the population estimates and Mahabharata descriptions, at the end of Mahabharata war, 18 days, we have a female to male ratio of 5:1. Now, Monica Carmen 2015 paper is saying suddenly something happened some time ago somewhere in the world, and the female to male ratio became like a 16:1 absolute scale or 5:1 on a relative scale. So something perfectly matching. If you see this data, if you are curious and if you understand genetics and if you know Mahabharata, you should ask the question, oh, that's interesting. Now, could you tell me when did this happen in the past and where did it happen? Just for a metaphor, I'm going to give you earthquake metaphor. If you hear about the earthquake, bhukampa, you hear in the news, immediately what questions you ask? Usually you ask three questions. You ask, where did it happen? When did it happen? And how serious was the earthquake? What was the intensity, like a Richter scale? Just take that as a metaphor, as an analogy, and let's ask this question to this archaeogenetics data. So we already know how severe it was, 16:1 or 5:1 ratio. That's like a Richter scale, female to male diversity. Now let's ask the remaining two questions. When did it happen and where did it happen? What was the epicenter, like the earthquake epicenter? The answer Monica Carmen's paper gives is this. It happened 7,500 years ago. I'm not kidding, guys. That paper is out there and you can read it. But you need some knowledge of astronomy, but you also need a scientific acumen. You need genetics information, genetics knowledge, and you also need a logical reasoning skills. Otherwise, you'll reach some very crazy conclusion. 7,500 years ago is what it happened. And if you ask, what was the epicenter? Do you know what is the answer? Because in modern times, they call India as a South Asia, which is a wrong nomenclature. Okay, we should not use South Asia. We should use always India. They say the epicenter was South Asia, which means India. When did it happen? 7,500 years ago. And what happened? Suddenly, the male diversity crashed. And usually the ratio should be what? I will not go into that, but the relative ratio would be 3:1. The absolute ratio would be 3:1. The relative ratio should be 1:1, we would say. That suddenly changed to 5:1 relative ratio. Absolute ratio changed from 3:1 to 16:1. And now, if you know Mahabharata, you know why that happened. It perfectly matches, perfectly corroborates the Mahabharata date. Last important point before I give back to Ravishankar ji. We are not saying based on this genetics data, we are saying Mahabharata what happened in 5561 BC or 7,500 years ago. That is there from the Mahabharata evidence of astronomy, and as we saw for Dwarka, and if you would have time, you would have gone into hydrology, morphodynamics of rivers, climatology, everything. But this data, genetics data, who have nothing to do with Mahabharata, they don't even know about Mahabharata, their data very beautifully, smoothly corroborates and supports the already existing conclusion of Mahabharata war happening in 5561 BC, where 4 million men, exclusively men, died in 18 days. Ravishankarji, back to you.
താങ്ക് യു നലേഷ്. അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞു വന്നിരുന്നത്, നമ്മൾ ഇപ്പോൾ പല രീതിയിലുള്ള തെളിവുകളെ പറ്റി സംസാരിച്ചു. അതായത് ജ്യോതിശാസ്ത്രപരമായ കാര്യങ്ങളെപ്പറ്റി സംസാരിച്ചു, അതേപോലെ തന്നെ ദ്വാരകയെ പറ്റി നമ്മൾ സംസാരിച്ചു. അത് കൂടാതെ കണക്കിലെടുക്കേണ്ടത് ജനിതക ശാസ്ത്രവും ഭൗതിക നരവംശാസ്ത്രവുമാണ്. അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞു ഈ മഹാഭാരത യുദ്ധത്തിൽ ഏതാണ്ട് 18 അക്ഷൗഹിണികൾ അതിൽ പങ്കെടുത്തിരുന്നു. അത് ഒരു അക്ഷൗഹിണി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഒരു പ്രത്യേക നമ്മൾ സൈന്യത്തിലെ ഒരു കമ്പനി എന്നോ ഒക്കെ നമുക്ക് വിചാരിക്കാം. എങ്കിലും ഈ 18 അക്ഷൗഹിണി എന്ന് പറയുന്നതിൻ്റെ ഒരു പൂർണ്ണമായ ഒരു കണക്ക് പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഏതാണ്ട് 4 മില്യൺ, അതായത് 40 ലക്ഷത്തോളം ആൾക്കാർ ആ യുദ്ധത്തിൽ പങ്കെടുത്തിരുന്നു. ആ യുദ്ധത്തിൻ്റെ 18 ദിവസം കൊണ്ട് ഏതാണ്ട് ആ 40 ലക്ഷം പേരും 99% പേരും മരണമടയുന്നതാണ് നമ്മളവിടെ കണ്ടത്. അപ്പോൾ അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നത് ഈ യുദ്ധത്തിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് സിറിയ വരെ ഉള്ള, സിറിയയിൽ നിന്ന് പോലുമുള്ള രാജവംശങ്ങൾ ഇതിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കാനായിട്ട് എത്തിയിരുന്നു എന്ന് അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞു. സിറിയ എന്നതിന് പകരം സുരിയ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സൂര്യ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് പോലെയുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങളെ പറ്റിയിട്ട് അദ്ദേഹം ഇവിടെ പറയുകയുണ്ടായി. അപ്പോൾ ഇതിൽ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ജനിതകപരമായി ഉള്ള പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ഒരു കാര്യം പറഞ്ഞത്, അത് ഏതാണ്ട് അന്നത്തെ ആ ഒരു ജനസംഖ്യ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഏതാണ്ട് 200 ലക്ഷം ആൾക്കാരാണ് എന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അതിൽ ഏതാണ്ട് ഒരു വലിയൊരു ശതമാനം ആൾക്കാർ, ഏതാണ്ട് 4 മില്യൺ, 20 മില്യൻ്റെ 4 മില്യൺ എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ ഏതാണ്ട് 40 ലക്ഷത്തോളം ആൾക്കാർ ഇതേപോലെ യുദ്ധത്തിൽ മരിച്ചു പോകുന്ന സമയത്ത് അവിടെ മെയിൽ ക്രോമസോമിൻ്റെ ഒരു വലിയൊരു വ്യതിയാനം അവിടെ സംഭവിക്കുകയാണ്. ആൺ പെൺ അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു അനുപാതത്തിൽ വളരെ വളരെ വലിയൊരു വ്യത്യാസം സംഭവിക്കുന്നതായിട്ട് നമ്മൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കേണ്ടതുണ്ട്. അതിന് അദ്ദേഹം ഒരു റിസർച്ച് പേപ്പറിനെ പറ്റി ഇവിടെ സംസാരിച്ചിരുന്നു. പേര് ഞാൻ ശരിക്കും ഓർക്കുന്നില്ല, എങ്കിലും അദ്ദേഹം ഒരു റിസർച്ച് പേപ്പർ സംസാരിച്ചപ്പോൾ അതിൽ ജനിതകപരമായി നമുക്ക് കാണാൻ കഴിയുന്നത് ഈ അനുപാതത്തിലെ വലിയൊരു മാറ്റം, അത് ശാസ്ത്രീയപരമായി നമുക്കത് കാണാൻ സാധിക്കുന്നതാണ്. അതിൻ്റെ കാലഘട്ടം, നടന്നിരുന്ന കാലഘട്ടം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഏതാണ്ട് 7500 വർഷമാണെന്നുള്ളത് നമ്മളെല്ലാം അമ്പരിപ്പിക്കുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യമാണെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. അത് കൂടാതെ തന്നെ അതിൻ്റെ എപ്പിസെൻറ്റർ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു ഉത്ഭവ സ്ഥാനം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, അവർ പറയുന്നത് സൗത്ത് ഈസ്റ്റ് ഏഷ്യ എന്ന് പറയുമെങ്കിലും നമുക്കത് കൃത്യമായിട്ട് പറയാം, അത് ഭാരതത്തിൽ തന്നെയാണ്. ഭാരതമായിരുന്നു അതിൻ്റെ എപ്പിസെൻറ്റർ. നമുക്ക് ഈ ഒരു തെളിവുകളെക്കുറിച്ച് സംസാരിക്കുന്ന സമയത്ത് സരസ്വതി റിവറിനെ പറ്റി, അതായത് സരസ്വതി നദിയെ പറ്റിയിട്ടും എല്ലാം സംസാരിച്ചിരുന്നു. ഹൈഡ്രോളജി പോലുള്ള പല സങ്കേതങ്ങളും ഇതിന് ഉപയോഗിക്കാമെങ്കിൽ കൂടി തന്നെ ഈ ജനിതകപരമായ ഒരു കാര്യവും നമ്മൾ പ്രത്യേകം പരിഗണിക്കേണ്ടതാണ്. ഈ ആൺ പെൺ വ്യത്യാസത്തിലെ അതിൽ റേഷ്യോയിൽ വന്ന വലിയൊരു വ്യതിയാനം നമുക്ക് ശാസ്ത്രീയപരമായി നമ്മുടെ മുമ്പിലുണ്ട്. അത് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് എല്ലാവർക്കും പോയി വായിക്കാവുന്നതാണ്. റിസർച്ചിൻ്റെ പേര് നമ്മുടെ യൂട്യൂബിൽ നമുക്ക് കാണാനായിട്ട് സാധിക്കും. ഒന്നുകൂടി ഞാൻ പേര് ഓർക്കാത്തതുകൊണ്ടാണ് അത് പറഞ്ഞത്. Nilesh, back to you.
Thank you. And you know what? This evidence can go on and on. There are 1,000 pieces of evidence. In fact, it's very difficult to keep track of how you even count the evidence. So we are going to stop on that trail now. There is a lot of evidence that continues to enrich and support this dating that I talked about. But I want to conclude on 3 key points, or 4 maybe. One takeaway, that somebody asked you today, from tomorrow today, and how ancient is our civilization. And after being convinced, not before that, after only if you have a shraddha and some additional tapasya I'm going to ask you to do, then only you should start saying this. But frankly, right now somebody asks you, and if you say 5,000 without doing any tapasya, or without any shraddha per se, it's perfectly okay to switch over and say, now, hey, we have at least it's 24,000 years old. I did not say only 24,000 years old or only 21,000, more than 24,000. That's the right terminology. So that's one takeaway. The second one is Mahabharata evidence is beyond impressive. Okay. And all of it leads to one specific date, no other, no ifs, no buts, to 5561 BC as the year of Mahabharata war. This is my second point, or third point. The last point, in our Indian tradition, we do start with a Shraddha. Like Bhagwan Patanjali in his Yoga Sutra, he said, Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Pradnya. That is the journey. You always begin with a Shraddha. Or Bhagavad Gita also, you will hear, Tadvidi Pranipatena Pariprashnena Sevaya. Okay, so you would have to have a Shraddha. You also do Seva, you do Namaskar, you show respect. And then Pariprashnena, you do the Seva with asking the right questions, because we are getting into question answer session right now, right? Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshantite jnanam jnanina tattvadarshina. And those people will give you the knowledge that they have. But everyone has a limited knowledge. So I don't want you to take this just as a word and believe it. Okay, it starts with a shraddha, conviction, but it should turn into virya, strength. Okay, samadhi, shraddha, virya, smriti, acquisition of knowledge, that is smriti. Samadhi, then focusing on certain one subject, just like I focused on this Mahabharata for 30 plus years, nothing else. Okay, we have to find our swadharma and do it, and that leads to pradnya, and that leads to Indic Renaissance. So I don't want you to take it on just a word of it. Read my works, watch my videos, read my blogs, read my books, read works of other Mahabharata researchers. If you think you are capable, watch their videos, do comprehend the difference, make up your mind, and whatever, once you are convinced, make sure you tell about this to your family members, to your children, to your parents, to your friends, to your colleagues. Do not think that only the people who research and give speeches like, or presentations like myself, it's our responsibility. That way we cannot reach everyone. How many of you knew about Nilesh before you came to this talk today? My answer, I don't know the number, but many of you would have not even heard. And even if you would have heard the name, you may not know what I have done. That is true for many of our great researchers. So they have a limitation how much they can do. So we need everybody's help. Ravishankar ji, back to you.
താങ്ക് യു. ഇത് ഒരു ഉപസംഹാരമായിട്ട് അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞത് പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട 3 പോയിന്റുകളാണ്. അത് മഹാഭാരതത്തിലെ തെളിവുകൾ വളരെ ശ്രദ്ധേയമാണ്. കാരണം ഒരു പർട്ടിക്കുലർ ഒരു പ്രത്യേകം ഒരു ഗ്രൂപ്പ് എവിഡൻസ് മാത്രമല്ല ഉള്ളത്, പല രീതിയിലുള്ള തെളിവുകൾ നമുക്ക് കാണാവുന്നതാണ്. അതിന് ജ്യോതിശാസ്ത്രപരമായിട്ടുള്ളത് പറഞ്ഞു, ജോഗ്രഫിക്കലായിട്ടുള്ളത് പറഞ്ഞു, അതുപോലെ ജനിതകപരമായിട്ടുള്ള തെളിവുകളെ പറ്റി പറഞ്ഞു. അങ്ങനെ ധാരാളം തെളിവുകൾ മഹാഭാരതത്തിലുണ്ട് എന്നുള്ളത് നമ്മൾ പ്രത്യേകമായിട്ട് മനസ്സിലാക്കണം. ഈ തെളിവുകളെല്ലാം, രണ്ടാമത്തെ പോയിന്റാണ്, ഈ തെളിവുകളെല്ലാം തന്നെ ഒരു പ്രത്യേക തീയതിയിലേക്ക് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു കാലഘട്ടത്തിലേക്കാണ് നമ്മളെ നയിക്കുന്നത്. അത് 5561 BCE എന്നുള്ള കാലഘട്ടത്തിലേക്കാണ് നമ്മളെ നയിക്കുന്നത്. മൂന്നാമത്തത്, നമ്മുടെ ഭാരതീയ സംസ്കാരം അനുസരിച്ചിട്ട് ഒരാൾ പറയുന്നു, അത് പൂർണ്ണമായും നമ്മൾ മലയാളത്തിൽ പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അത് തൊണ്ട തൊടാതെ വിഴുങ്ങുന്ന ഒരു ഇതിലേക്കല്ല പോകേണ്ടത്. അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങളെല്ലാം നമ്മൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കുക, അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ കൃതികൾ വായിക്കുക, അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ വീഡിയോകൾ നമുക്ക് അവൈലബിൾ ആണ്, അത് നമുക്ക് കാണാം. മഹാഭാരത ഗവേഷകരുടെ കൃതികളും വായിക്കുക, മറ്റ് ഗവേഷകരുടെ കൃതികളും വീഡിയോകളും എല്ലാം കാണുകയും മനസ്സിലാക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുക. എന്നിട്ട് നിങ്ങളുടേതായ യുക്തിക്കും ഒക്കെ യോജിക്കുന്നത് ഏതാണെന്ന് തിരിച്ചറിയുക. അത് എല്ലാവരുമായിട്ടും അത് സംവദിക്കുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ടും അത് ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്നതിനും ഒക്കെ ചെയ്ത് നമ്മുടെ അനുമാനത്തിലേക്ക് എത്തുകയാണ് വേണ്ടത്. ഈ പറയുന്നത് എല്ലാവരുടെയും തെളിവുകളും കാര്യങ്ങളും എല്ലാം നമ്മൾ ഉൾക്കൊണ്ട് അതിൽ നമുക്ക് ഏറ്റവും യുക്തിസഹമായി ഉൾക്കൊള്ളാൻ സാധിക്കുന്ന തെളിവുകളെ നമ്മൾ ഉൾക്കൊണ്ട് നമ്മൾ അത് എടുക്കണമെന്ന് അദ്ദേഹം എൻ്റെ അവസാനത്തിൽ പറയുകയും ചെയ്തു. Nilesh ji, I think we can go for the question answer session, isn't it?
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So let me make a few announcements before that. ശരത്തെ നമുക്ക് ഹാൻഡ് റൈസിങ് ഓപ്പൺ ചെയ്യാം. ആൻഡ് എന്താ പറയുക, ചോദ്യം ചോദിക്കാനായിട്ട് മുകളിലേക്ക് വരുന്നവർ ഞാൻ എപ്പോഴും പറയാറുണ്ട്, ഇന്ന് കുറച്ചുകൂടി ഇതായിട്ട് പറയുകയാണ്, നിങ്ങൾ ചോദ്യം നേരെ ചോദിക്കാനായിട്ട് പ്രത്യേകം ശ്രദ്ധിക്കുക. അതിൽ ഒരു ആമുഖത്തിൻ്റെയോ മുഖവരയുടെയോ കാര്യമില്ല. നിങ്ങൾക്ക് നിങ്ങളുടെ ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ നേരെ ചോദിക്കാവുന്നതാണ്. ചോദ്യം ചോദിക്കുന്നവർ പ്രത്യേകം ശ്രദ്ധിക്കുക. നിങ്ങൾക്ക് നിങ്ങളുടെ ചോദ്യം ചോദിക്കാം. നിങ്ങൾ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്ന ഉത്തരം കിട്ടണമെന്ന് വാശി പിടിക്കരുത്. നിങ്ങളുടെ ചോദ്യം ചോദിക്കുക, അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ അഭിപ്രായം കേൾക്കുക, അതിൽ തൃപ്തിപ്പെടേണ്ടതാണ്. അത് പ്രത്യേകം നിങ്ങളെ ഓർമ്മിപ്പിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നു. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഈ ഒരു സത്യമേ ജയതേ എന്നുള്ള ഈ ഒരു ക്ലബ്ബ് ഫോളോ ചെയ്യാത്തവരുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഒന്ന് ഫോളോ ചെയ്യണമെന്നും, അതുപോലെ മോഡറേറ്റേഴ്സിനെ ഫോളോ ചെയ്യണമെന്നും പ്രത്യേകം അഭ്യർത്ഥിക്കുകയാണ്. ഞങ്ങൾ ഇനിയും പ്രോഗ്രാമുകൾ നമ്മൾ സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. നിങ്ങൾക്കെല്ലാം നോട്ടിഫിക്കേഷൻസ് ഉണ്ടായിരിക്കുന്നതാണ്. മോഡറേറ്റേഴ്സിനെ ഫോളോ ചെയ്യാനും ക്ലബ്ബ് ഫോളോ ചെയ്യാനും പ്രത്യേകം ശ്രദ്ധിക്കുക. ഞാൻ ചോദ്യകർത്താക്കളിലേക്ക് പോകാം. ആദ്യം ചോദിക്കാനുള്ളത് ശ്രീജിത്താണ്. ഒരു കാര്യം കൂടി ഒന്ന് മുമ്പ് പറഞ്ഞോട്ടെ. For those who can't give your questions or ask your questions in English, you can ask that in Malayalam. I will translate it for you. നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഇംഗ്ലീഷിൽ ചോദ്യം ചോദിക്കാൻ ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും അത് മലയാളത്തിൽ ചോദിക്കാം. ഞാനത് ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് കൊടുത്ത് ഉത്തരം തരുന്നതാണ്. അതിലെന്തെങ്കിലും മനസ്സിലാവാത്ത കാര്യങ്ങളുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അതും ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് ശ്രമിക്കുന്നതാണ്. ഞാൻ ആദ്യത്തെ ചോദ്യകർത്തലേക്ക് പോവാം. I will go to the first questioner. Srijit bhai, you can ask.
Hello, Nilesh ji. So far, I haven't seen any this archaeological evidence data published in about Mahabharata. And another thing, last you said 4 million people were attended in Kurukshetra war. I feel it is illogical. I'm sorry to say that. How this much people can reach war point in a certain time, and war was only lasted 18 days. Hope you understood my question.
Yeah, I understood the question. Like there are two questions in a way. That our first was a comment where you said um, you have not seen archaeology evidence yet. If you're by archaeology evidence, if you mean like a copper plate, or if you mean some shila lake, like stone inscription which says Mahabharat war happened these many thousand years ago, and I'm writing this king is writing it on this date, that no, such a evidence does not exist. In fact, I don't know if that's what you meant, but if when such a evidence is found, is actually not very useful as people think, because now we have to ask the questions: who wrote that, and what was that person's assumption? Suppose somebody, many for a long time people believe 3000 BC is when around the Kali Yuga and Mahabharata war happened, and therefore we find many inscriptions written in the last say 2000 years, many inscriptions, and we call that archaeology evidence. Tamrapat, copper plates, and Shila Lake, like Ayole, and you would have heard that, and that's not actually Mahabharata, that's a different subject, but people have interpreted that relating to Mahabharata. But that is not, that is a narration, just like we have a narration in the book. What is important is there a objective way to take a crucial evidence out of it that otherwise we would not have believed, such as Arundhati Vasishta, or such as Bhishma Nirvana, and there was many others, or such as this flooding and destruction of Dwarka, relating that to sudden sea rise levels around the world, including Dwarka. This is all archaeology evidence. Now, I don't want you to accept it if you don't want to accept it. That's not my point. My point is to just state that this is archaeology evidence. Finding pots and pans is also archaeology evidence. Finding a sword is also archaeology evidence, but that is not only archaeology evidence. The second question you had, that you find it hard to believe that 4 million people would have fought in 18 days. Yeah, even I may find it hard to believe. Okay, but the belief is not how science works. The point is, we begin with the Mahabharata descriptions. Now, because it is there in the Mahabharata, we are not immediately saying blindly accept it. In fact, we have no other way to counter it. So, which is to say, suppose Mahabharata already says, Mahabharata gives a description 18 Aukshayani, how much one Aukshayani means, and if you add up these numbers, it's all there in Mahabharata. It adds up to approximately 4 million. Okay, 3,096,000, whatever that number comes to. Now, if you want to object to that number, saying, I don't believe this, I don't think this is correct, you have a right to object. But your objection is only meaningful if you can bring a counter evidence and saying why this is not possible, or here is the evidence which says otherwise, and here is a supporting evidence for that. Until that happens, the narration remains. Whether true or false, we don't know. Like, if I say my father's name is Nilesh Nilakanta, my father's name was Sridhar, Nilakanta Sridhar. So the only way is you either take it on a Shraddha, or you go and do the investigation. So there is a 4 million number that is there. And if you look at the Kurukshetra war and the descriptions, the what you call circumference of 48 kilometers or 48 miles, that's what they call the Kurukshetra or Kurukshetra Parikrama. And not everyone is fighting at the same time. I mean, I have one of my friends, Shiva Shastri, is a military expert. I have run that question by him some 10 years ago, and he finds it perfectly reasonable. Now, that's not to say what you're saying is not correct or something, but if you have an alternate theory, alternate proposal, then you have to bring it up. Until then, it just remains an opinion. And remember, we all have opinions. Back to you, Ravishankarji.
Thank you. I think actually now Srijit's question has been answered. Thank you, Srijit. I will move to the second questioner. RK, you can ask your question.
Yeah, namaste. Good evening, Nilesh ji. Thank you for coming and sharing your vast and deep knowledge on this Mahabharata and all after your research and studies. I have two questions, just to, like on this subject and on another subject. One thing, why I want to ask you is like, as you mentioned, Dwaraka, which was submerged after the sea rise level and all. There are so many YouTube videos showing the underwater kind of demolished city and all. Is that true? That's my first question. And my second question is like there is a Ram Setu which belongs to the Ramayana time. Have you done any research on that? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So two questions. Let me tell the second question. Rama Setu. Like, I have done a whole research on Ramayana, that Rama Setu becomes a small part of it. So yes, I have done the research, but that is not the subject today. So I'll not talk briefly about it. But I have a whole talk on the Ravana's Lanka, and of course many other talks on Ramayana. So I would encourage you and all of others who are listening to it to watch those. Also, I have written a book on the Ramayana itself called The Historic Rama. Please read that. So that's a big subject, like the Setu, but Setu is a small subject of the Ramayana. Ramayana is a big subject, so I'll not go there. Now, the first question was about Dwarka, and some of the videos we see, or some of the pictures, sometimes photographs we see, like literally, they show like a city under the ocean, even more marvelous than any city we may have on the ground today. Now, some good percentage of it is extremely fake. I don't know how many of you, just because the subject you asked that question, I'll say how many of you have got this in a WhatsApp or whatnot, like 38,000-year-old Vigraha, and they show a bronze statue. It's a, I mean, uh, have I done an investigation on that? No, and therefore I could be wrong. But based on my knowledge, just I see a news like that, and I can say it's a fake news. Now, somebody will say, come on, Nilesh. I mean, you are also talking of, I mean, by the way, I do talk of 75,000 plus years of Indian history. Okay. Today, I just took you to 21,000 BC, 24,000 years, because you know what, like when the baby starts eating, now I'm not saying your guys are babies, but we give them in a small portion, and then the diet slowly goes up. Didn't want to surprise you or shock you, but we are studying as far back as 220,000. That's a different subject. But my point is, somebody says 38,000 bronze statue. I don't have a problem having a bronze statue 38,000 years ago. The way the news is projected, without any reference, without any background knowledge, just tells me it's a fake news. And so I will say some of the very bombastic pictures you might see of underground Dwarka, those are not correct. Having said that, the Dwarka excavations, through many studies, people have found that there are well organized structures, like a city structures below, walls and whatnot. So that is true. Now remember, 7,500 years ago, a lot must have been destroyed. Again, Dwarka existed before Krishna. It was known as Kushasthali. And there are archaeological, like before Srijiji said no archaeology, there are archaeological objects like which have been dated, found from there, goes back to 30,000 BC. I don't know if you know that. Now this is not Krishna's Dwarka, but the place called Kushasthali, and you can find the descriptions in a Bhagavad Puran. My point is, we have a deep antiquity, but we should be very careful when we look at these fancy pictures of Dwarka or a 38,000-year-old bronze vigraha. In fact, when somebody sends that to me or something, I basically put them on a mute or a block or something, because that means the person did not use any discrimination in conveying the news. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, RK. I will move on to the next one. It is Maddie. Maddie, you can ask your question.
Jai Shri Ram, Nilesh ji, hope you're doing well. First of all, before I ask the question, I just wanted to compliment the mods of this room for organizing such a wonderful room, and Nilesh ji for taking the time off and educating us on all this. Nilesh ji, two-part question. First part is, from what I've read, the Saraswati River began drying. I mean, it went completely dry by, say, around. I'll take the liberty of mentioning Major General Bakshi's book as well over here as a source here. That it went dry by 2000 BC. Roughly thereabouts 2000 2500 BC, and Balrama's journey also mentions that the river is drying up. So I'm not able to get the timeline, or rather maybe I'm just confused on the timeline when you say it's much older than that, because the geological evidences suggest that it was a flowing river up around the timeline that you just mentioned. So I was just wondering if I've got the timelines wrong, or if you could just explain. Second part of the question is, sir, I was just wondering how I can reach out to you, sir. I mean, would it be okay if I send you my number on back channel and maybe request your number as well, sir? Thank you.
Okay. So let's take as a two question. I'll start with the second question. I mean, if you are connected with Ravishankar ji, you can get my email. Instead of a phone, and if phone conversation is required, we can do that afterwards. But I want all conversations to begin with the email, very specific, crisp, and clean conversation. Again, the reason is, as you can imagine, like today, for example, I just came from one program. Now I'm doing this one, and I'm into a 2-day long conference, on the West Coast. Like I'm participating from here, but from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. both today and tomorrow. So that's the kind of life I live, and then I work 5 days, of course. Next week I'm going to another city in America, and just goes on. So long story short, like Dr. No, and you may know the James Bond movie, the first James Bond movie. So that evil Dr. No, that's me.
Yes, sir. Yes,
D
sir.
DRNO dot 5561 BC. So now you won't forget when Mahabharata war happened. Dr. No dot 5561 BC at gmail.com is what my email is. And any one of us is perfectly okay to communicate there. Just be very crisp, clean, clear, sharp, as short as possible. What is it that you're looking for, or what is the point you want to convey? And we can start the communication there. Now, the first question about Saraswati. General Bakshi, I know very well. I have met with him. That particular book, General Bakshi's book, but also another book you might know, The Lost River by Michel Daninoji, and General Bakshi. I have met both of them. I know both of them. And there are some good points in both of the books. Okay, actually, I've given a talk on River Saraswati at Sangam Talks. I would encourage all of you to watch that talk also on the Sangam Talks in YouTube. A good portion of it, I would say, I mean, the books are good. There is a good takeaways from that. But as far as the absolute chronology of River Saraswati is concerned, it's being a grand Saraswati, when it started drying, when it was rejuvenated again, why it was rejuvenated, why it started drying again, why it was why and when it was finally gone. As far as these subjects are concerned, a lot that is written in the book of Michel Daninogy, The Lost River, or the book of General Bakshiji is factually incorrect. Now, what is correct? Again, it will become a long subject. So I'm going to say, go back, go to Sangam Talks, Reverse Saraswati, and type Nilesh. You're going to find my talk. But don't stop there. I mean, you will listen to my talk and then just go to Google and start typing Saraswati or rivers of the Northwest India. I mean, I have 200 plus publications. Now, please don't ask me, says, hey, please send me the paper or please send me the name of it. It's impossible. I'll not able to do anything meaningful otherwise. And I have to do this every time, that doesn't happen. But it is so easily available. Like you just type River Saraswati or Northwest Rivers, you are going to find publication. Once you find one paper and you look at the cross references, you're going to find 20 more. You read those papers and you're going to find each paper is going to give you 20 more. In very short time, you're going to have 500 publications, I'm not kidding, related to River Saraswati, published in the last 100 years. And you will be fascinated how consistent the evidence is, which I'm going to summarize. River Saraswati, and it may be going even back further, but we have a powerful evidence, empirical evidence, peer-reviewed evidence that it was flowing beautifully as a grand river of Rigveda for 200,000 plus years. Specific numbers I can tell you, but I don't want to bore you with that. 177,000 BC, that is near Bikaner. A lot of geological changes took place. River got shifted to the north. Around 70,000, it went to Kalibanga or where it is. It was still a grand river. By 50,000 BC, between 50,000 and 40,000 BC, Yamuna separated from Saraswati. That's not to say some of its distributaries or distributaries might be still going to Saraswati. Then by 13,000 BC, Satluj also separated at Ropar or Rupanagar in Punjab from Saraswati. Then this is the big differences. Now there is something other phenomenon called last glacial maximum, some 25,000 to 20,000 BC. So much water was frozen into the glaciers that the flow of water into Saraswati went down. By 20,000 BC. The Saraswati was still a great river, still a grand river, but not the grand river of Rigveda anymore. So river reduction in Saraswati water began 20,000 BC. Then it was like that. Okay, then the monsoon increased during the Ramayana times, because you can see the descriptions of Ramayana monsoon in 14,000 also. So Saraswati sort of rejuvenated, but it was no longer the grand river. By the time you come to Mahabharata, it is in flux. Mahabharata has 100 plus different descriptions of Saraswati. Some places it's flowing with a lots of water, grand river kind of scenario. Other places it has gone under the sea. Some places it's coming, sorry, under the sand. Some places it's coming out of the sand. In fact, Saraswati stopped meeting the sea 10,000 years ago. That itself just tells you that Rigveda is definitely more than 10,000 years ago. Okay, because Rigveda describes Giribhya Asamudra in describing Saraswati, that river which flows from high mountains all the way to the ocean. And if you study, and I have not written more books on it, but so you have to listen to the talks, and eventually I'll write one on River Saraswati. The 100 plus descriptions of River Saraswati beautifully match 5561 BCE. There is a Anindya Sarkar 2016 study, or Khonde 2014, 2014, 2016, 2017, on and on. Singh 2017. Okay, Clift, Peter Clift 2012. I mean, going back to 1980s, Mary Corti and Frankfurt, so many. All of this will give you the consistent picture that I just described. And therefore, by 2000 BC, there is no question of the Saraswati that is described in the Mahabharata. you have to go before 4500 BC, purely on the hydrology, geology, geophysics, and morphodynamics evidence. Hope that answers. Long answer.
Thank you,
Sorry
sir.
about that.
Thank you, sir. I'm so sorry. I didn't get your email ID, sir. Doctor No 5561, correct, sir?
Yeah, Doctor No dot like a period 5561 BCE before Common Era BCE
Okay.
at
Okay.
gmail.com. Yeah,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you much. Thank you. I'll move myself.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Maddie. I will move to the next person. Apparently, if any one of the moderators have any question, please blink your mic. Uh, I'll move to the next questioner. Cognitive, you can ask your question.
Yeah, my question is regarding the army itself, because the Indian army presently is having 1.5 million soldiers only. So it appears incongruous or unlikely that so many years back, now that is, according to you, Mahabharata Yuddha took place in 5000 BC. So in such a remote past, it seems to very unlikely that we will have so much soldiers. That is 4 million soldiers, whereas we are having only 1.5 million with this population of India, and with this the amount of food we are producing and exporting and all that level of affluence is there. Still, we have only 1.5 million totally. So these numbers don't seem to add up. And also the agriculture started around 10,000 years ago. It's anthropologists have come to that conclusion. So in that context, how is it possible that such a large army, huge army, can be maintained from an agriculture that was only started around 10,000 years? So these are my questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Good point. I mean, the both are comments and they are good. So I'll split that into two. One is like comparison with the modern Indian army and the 1.5 million versus 4 million, and the other question about the agriculture. First, it's very important we start knowing something about the past based on our current knowledge that is given. But it's also critical to be careful in not imposing our current understanding or even our current contemporary situation and extrapolate to the past, as much as we should not take the situation of the past and extrapolate it to the present. That's not to say we cannot do it. We should do it, but we should do it in a methodical fashion. So what is the argument? The argument is that Indian army with so much 130 crore population, we have a 1.5 million. And so how come is the 4 million is possible? Well, I don't think we are going to solve this question. I mean, if, I would say, Namaskar, I forgot the name, but cognitive or whoever say, that is not even an argument. I mean, science wise, that argument doesn't work. It's considered a fallacy, which is to say, today 130 crore only corresponds to 1.5 million, whatever the number of army is. Therefore, how come only 10, 20 million or whatever that population there, or India's population maybe even less, can correspond to 4 million? We just I mean, that's not even logical, that's not even scientific, nothing. Now, does it help? Yeah, it may help you thinking, oh my god, what was the situation. My point is, if we have to know something about Mahabharata, we don't have to accept blindly what is written in Mahabharata, but we have to start there. We cannot sit in our rooms and just keep on speculating, which is what the Indologists have done for last 200 300 years. I'll give you as an example. Now the person who asked the question, again, I don't know what you think of Mahabharata and history, and I will not ask you that, or when in your opinion it happened. But see, the opinions are dime a dozen. Everyone has an opinion, right? What matters is that you put a conjecture and then you bring the evidence in its support, and also the evidence which might contradict with it. Now there was one Professor Hopkins at university, at Harvard University, last 100 years. And one day, just sitting on his desk, he just said, you know what? I mean, they don't believe that Mahabharata as a history, because it bothers their philosophy. By the way, you always hear Hindu mythology, okay? Indian mythology. Let me ask you, just as an eye opener question: how many of you have heard in academia or otherwise a word Christian mythology or Islamic mythology? or Judaic mythology or Abrahamic mythology. I bet you have never heard this word until today. Now, this is not based on any fact. This is based on agenda. But back to Professor Hopkins. So one day he just sat there and he said, you know what? I think this Mahabharata was written because to them it's just a story. 400 CE, like, that's to say like 1600 years ago. And what is his evidence? No, he's a professor at Harvard. He felt like saying it. And that's it. And now you will see this written. I mean, he said might have said it 100 years ago. You see this written everywhere in all things. Some person came and said, I don't think Bhagavad Gita is a part of Mahabharata. No evidence why he or she thinks like that. Now it is there in all literature around the world, but also in India. My point is, somebody feels something to his or her thinking, it doesn't make sense, is not a evidence of anything. Now, just another point, not to support the 4 million. The 4 million number is there in the Mahabharata, right or wrong? Okay. Now, I gave you, for example, just as a way of, because the evidence existed. If you would have asked me this question before 2015, before Monica Carmen paper, I didn't have anything, by the way. But now that the paper is there, I can even make sense of, or I could actually successfully make sense of that 4 million number with the population estimate. None of these numbers are mine, by the way. Please understand. I am the one who is analyzing it, synthesizing it, but the 18 Aukshayani is in Mahabharata. 4 million corresponds to 18 Aukshayani is also in the Mahabharata. It's not my number. Monica Carmen's, there is no some conspiracy going on. I don't know who that lady is. I don't know how she looks. When I'm putting it together, it makes sense. And the science is about more likely versus less likely. So based on that, we'll say, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have known before 2015. In fact, you can go and find out. I have not talked anything about 4 million or 18 Aukshayani before that because I had no data to talk about. So that's the answer to your question. And I forgot. Now, was there a second? Oh yeah, agriculture. Now you said agriculture, the anthropologists are saying 10,000 years. I don't know which anthropologist you are referring to. I hope you have studied this. For example, Dorian Fuller. I don't know if she works at Cambridge, and she has done a lot of work related to agriculture. But she's not the only one, and she has done a great job. Not exactly on the dating part, but finding out. I mean, a India as if not the one of the starting point for agriculture. But if you have not heard this, you would have been taught, and please correct, I mean, please tell cognitive if you can, I don't know if you can open up back again and say this. You would have heard that it all began in the Levant, which is to say Mesopotamia, Iraq, and all this. It also began there, but that's not true. In fact, there is sufficient evidence now that domestic animals migrating from India to outside. Do you know? I mean, just name an animal, and there is a genetic evidence for its migration from India. Okay, but the two big one I will mention is the cow, the zebu cows, and also the domestic mouse. Now, do you know what are the datings on this? We are talking of 7,000 years ago, Ramayana times, but 12,000 Mahabharata times. Don't just go grazing from Kerala to Afghanistan. They grow with people. Now, what is the evidence? That you may not be aware of it. There is a evidence of a very solid peer-reviewed evidence of agriculture, and these are only lower limits. That's not to say only it started there, but it definitely started there. There is a evidence of agriculture in the Indian subcontinent. I'm saying because the evidence comes from Sri Lanka, going back to 16,000 BCE. All the things related to agriculture. If you go back further in the sense of harvesting of a wild grains, because it's as you go back in the past, the evidence is not always very clear. It gets less and less, and the quality of evidence also goes down because of the damage. But there is a evidence, again peer-reviewed journal, of a agriculture in the sense of harvesting. It's not very clear whether they were planting, but harvesting, storing, cooking, and all of this going back to, listen this carefully, all of you, 43,000 BC. Do Google, you will find the peer-reviewed paper. Again, this is shown in subcontinent, like, therefore Sri Lanka again. But if you go to Mehergarh, there are granaries that goes back to 7000 BC. If you go to Lahur Deva, that is going to now 10,000, 12,000, and as they're digging more, they are finding more. One more point, last point before we go to the next question. It's also very important to realize this is the evidence that we have found, which means we can tell. See, that's what we can tell, that definitely agriculture existed 16,000 BC. Definitely agriculture existed Mehergarh 7,000 BC. What we don't know is whether something existed before or not. To think of absence of evidence as evidence of absence is a logical fallacy, and we all need to be also very careful about that. Thank you. Back to Ravishankar ji.
Thank you. Thank you, Cognitive. Priya is the next one to ask the question. Priya, please go.
Hello.
You're audible. Yes, go
Namaste.
ahead.
Namaste, Nilesh ji. Actually, I
Namaste.
would like to ask if there is any temple in our country depicting some of the scenes of Mahabharata, so
Okay.
that it would be of help uh, to educate our children. That's my question.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not the expert there, but most of us would able to answer that. Yes, actually, there are many temples which are depicting the scenes from Mahabharata. They are built at different times and so on. And definitely, if there are, I mean, you find those. I mean, you can, I will not give the list. It's too so many temples in India. But
Okay.
remember, I mean, and so it's good to use them. But so if you're going there, happen to take your children, then great way. But that's not a very sure short way of telling them about, say, the historicity of a Mahabharata or something, right? Because you can now find even a Harry Potter museum, So think of that.
Yeah.
Uh, but yes, they are there everywhere throughout
Yeah,
India.
because it's like if you say it's like read Mahabharata, they introduced in textbooks. Rather than that, caricatures would imbibe more of throw more of light in them. So that was my this thing. However, nonetheless, your answer was right. Like you just can't this thing like
Right. Now, but let me add something to it. So, just like
yeah,
the temple is a good way to do it. Another one, like especially those of you who have young children or grandchildren, um, think of Amar Chitra Katha. Like to my now my daughter is like 18, but when she was like 4.5, like in fact right where I live, I took her to a library here, and I found like close to 80 books of Amar Chitra Katha, and she was 4,
yeah.
and
ACK is
she
the best.
complete.
Even not only for Mahabharata, for so many of our Indian culture. When we were children, also we read ACK.
Correct. So she finished that in like less than 3 months, those 80 books, believe it or not. And then I went
Oh,
to India next
okay,
time. I got all the 230, the whole collection of Amar Chitra Katha, and then she completed that in next 6 months. Now she
okay,
kind of grown up and bit different interest and forgets. But when I used to write something and sometime I'm not remembering a name of somebody, she was like 6 year old. I'll just call her. I say, hey, Arya, like, can you tell me, remember that king who used to follow the cow or something? And she will just go into thinking for 15 seconds, and she said, Daddy, is that King Dulip, or something, Dilip? And just she will tell me. So that's one thing. And while on the point, I will also mention another initiative. That's something that I'm working on very closely. That's something all of us, you should start participating by simply
okay,
subscribing and watching those videos. Is something, how many of you, I mean, again, I won't ask that because everyone would have to unmute and whatnot. Something called Pracham, P in Peter, Rachyam, Pracham.com. You can look at that.
mm,
But also Pracham, that first word, as a YouTube channel.
okay,
And I'll not tell you the whole long story of it. It's like one crazy fellow, Dr. No from America, met three crazy fellows from Varanasi in Jabalpur in 2020, and the outcome is a Pracham. We are working on documentaries, but we are working on literally 3-4 minute, like quick short videos, and please watch some of them. Those are wonderful videos to share with children, but they are
mm,
equally impressive, equally useful for grown-ups and folks of any age. In 7 minutes,
okay.
you can get some quick wisdom. So that's something we are working on. A lot of plans, a lot of ideas, but that's a
Yeah,
different
that's
subject.
nice actually. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to
Thank
Ravishankar
you,
ji.
moderators. Yeah.
Thank you. Unsung, you said actually you have a question. Unsung.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Very good afternoon, Nilesh. Thank you for having you in this program. My question is a bit towards the political side. 2014, we know that the regime which is in favor of Hinduism or culture is in power. Do you think we are lacking in exploring the evidences of offshore Gujarat, which is you said in your videos that which may be remains of Dwarakas? Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And that is I will expand that question because this is a frequently asked question where people would say, and again, it will be asked in the exactly same format that you asked. They would say, well, sir, but I mean, in the BJP government or, pro-Hindu government, people think pro-Hindu and all that. They are in power 2014 onwards. And how come they are not doing anything? How come they are not spending money or allocating money for more archaeology research? I don't. I mean, I interact with different ministries on in my limited capacity, but it's not like I have any influence on them. So I don't know what they think. But I'll tell you this: what I think, and I'm convinced about, and this is based on the fact, which is this: majority of the evidence, and let's call it archaeological evidence, because all evidence is archaeological. This is very important for people to understand. So archaeology evidence, whether you find some new text meaning a text that was lost or nobody even knew a certain text existed, ancient text, that's an archaeological discovery that now we know something written in that we did not know before, and we may able to by luck objectively test it. So all of these discoveries, all of this identification of evidence, actually, those of you who are into data analytics and data experts, you know that it is a happenstance data. It's a coincidentally we found it. Now sometimes we actually create evidence. We actually have a mission like the excavation at Dwarka, excavation somewhere, and yeah, we do it. But why do we do it? Because now we have sufficient evidence that there is a potential, and therefore we spend some time. But all the fascinating evidence is actually found as in a happenstance fashion. So in if you ask me for my personal not just feeling or opinion but a conviction, I don't think we should just go and start digging in Dwarka, start digging in Hastinapur. By the way, many Indic researchers are of that opinion. I consider that opinion utterly foolish. I'm not mincing words, guys, here. Now, that's not to say that if you found some site, I mean, I'll give you some examples. Like, how many of you, again, we cannot interact back and forth. You might have heard a stone called Rosetta Stone that allowed the decipherment of a Egyptian script. Do you know how it was found? It wasn't somebody sent on a mission, let's guys do some research and let's find a way to understand Egyptian script. It was found when Napoleon's army was fortifying one fort. Okay, if number of you might know of the whole terracotta warrior army of China, like in Xi'an, I've been there multiple times actually. Thousands and thousands of soldiers, uh, underground, buried underground. Now, do you know how they found it? They didn't say, "Oh, let's do some mission and let's see what's under that or hill." No, one farmer, he was digging a well. This is 1974, guys. Okay, he was digging a well, and as he kept on digging, actually, when he was removing the dirt, he actually ended up pulling one statue. And now suddenly it just changed into now they excavated the whole area and there's a whole army sitting there. My point is, you have to have a very solid lead before you do the digging or before you do the mission. And it, by the way, also realize it's extremely costly affair, and especially for a country like India, we have to be very careful. My point is, the available evidence which is already out there through our text but through our archaeological digs which are not even been cataloged, and evidence of all kinds. Many people outside India are creating free evidence for us, just like this river Saraswati or the genetics paper that I mentioned or the Dwarka evidence that I mentioned. No, actually very little of it is done by Indians. The evidence exists, guys. All we have to do is a Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Pradnya. Do the Tapashcharya, connect the dots. There is a enormous evidence out there. We have to connect the dots. And every time, my experience is, it tells the glorious history of India, but also of the world. Because, as you go back in the past, you have to also remember we are the world. It's not like a India versus somebody else. You go to South America, I've been there. I have been to the North Pole. I have seen that. And you can start seeing all the native traditions, that ancient wisdom. No, that's a natural human wisdom. Like Bhagavad Gita says, it's not sitting in some book. Chandasyasya parnani yastam veda saveda. If you use Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna as the method, you are going to capture the same wisdom that Vasudev did, same wisdom that Krishna did, same wisdom that Rama did, same wisdom that Valmiki did. Back to you, Ravishankar ji.
Thank you, Nilesh. Nilesh, I have a question. We have two more questioners, and there are many people actually who are asking if they can ask a question. Can you give us an extra 15 minutes so that, or 20 minutes?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we can do that.
Sure. Thank you very much. So that actually we can take a few more people. We'll limit it really small, at least actually, just to so many requests are coming. That's why I'm saying this.
Sure.
Sharath, നമുക്കൊരു മൂന്ന് പേരെ കൂടി എടുക്കാം, Sharath. Okay, I'll move on to the next question. Dishal, please ask.
Hello, sir. Thank you, sir, for sharing your knowledge with us today. And I came late to the room, so please excuse me if you have already mentioned that point. Sir, when you said that other countries, some 5 million soldiers came to the war in India. So that happened 7,000 years ago. So do we have like evidence for any kingdoms or any cultures existing in 7,000 years ago in those countries, like Syria, Turkey, Southeast Asia, or Europe? Even those mainstream European centric historians, they don't claim that they have any kingdoms or culture there 7,000 years ago. So like we are actually telling them that like you had kings who had contacts with Pandavas and Kauravas who came to India for the war. Like from outside, do we have any evidence?
I think Nilesh had exited probably because of a technical issue. He will be back.
Sorry, I don't know what happened, but I could not hear and mine got muted.
Yeah. I think actually you got exited for a brief minute.
Oh, okay.
Dishal, if you could repeat that question.
Can you repeat the question, please? Sorry about
Yes,
that.
sir. Yes, sir. So you said no. That 7,000 years ago, that soldiers came from outside countries like Turkey, Syria, the Europe, Southeast Asia, from everywhere. So like from what those mainstream historians say, especially that European centric people also, they don't claim actually to have uh, cultures or civilizations existing in that time period. Like we are actually telling them like you guys had kings and kingdoms who were in contact with Kauravas and Pandavas, and you guys came here for the war. But they don't have any archaeological or any scriptural evidence from their side. So how will we like
Okay.
answer to that?
So first, yeah. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Ravishankar ji, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Okay. So definitely people did not come from Europe. That is number one. I would say just as a border kind of think Syria, Turkey as the kind of a border on the west side. But that's not the main point. Even those people, the question like, they don't know or they are not saying it. First thing, they don't have any narrations that have survived from that time. Understand that. So we remember in science, like think of it's a 5-step framework. Even Nyaya Darshana, I mean, science came from Nyaya Darshana, I'll tell you this. Avayava is like, Sir Karl Popper, if those of you are familiar, he describes scientific method as what? It is a triangulation of explanation, prediction, testing. That's the triangle. Imagine a triangle and go to the top of the triangle in the context of a theory, which is proposed to solve a tough, unsolved problem, and come to the bottom of a triangle in the context of a background knowledge. Now, so what is the question? It's like saying, okay, why do these people say in Turkey Iraq and whatnot, don't know about the Mahabharat war, or their ancestors participating in the Mahabharat war. Well, because it has not survived in their memory, like a generational memory, civilizational memory, number one. Um, why? That will be a different question. You did not ask that, but I'm saying there can be many answers to that. And still, we don't know for sure. If you go to the East, relatively a better idea, again, the stories might have changed. In India, we are thankful, we are lucky that this has survived. It's very important to understand that. Just like I told you about the evidence that we have found, like Dwarka evidence or the genetic paper or the descriptions of Mahabharata, which is to say that the Mahabharata survived, we are lucky. Now, many of they might have had text. I don't know that. I'm not going to speculate about something that I don't know, but they have not survived if they existed. And civilizational memory did not end up being successful in conveying that information. So that is the answer to that. Now, are we trying to push them, saying, "Guys, come on, hold on. What are you saying? You were also in the Mahabharata times. You were land." No, we don't have. But if you look at our text, I'll just give you one example, and this can become a very long subject, so I want to make it short. Prague Jyotishpur, even our Indians, like most of you, if you hear that name, Prague Jyotishpur, immediately you're going to think of Assam, assuming you have done some Mahabharata or Ramayana study. Now, there may be multiple, there are many Rampurs, there are many names, many places with the similar names like Nagpur and whatnot. The point is, the Prague Jyotishpur, for example, let's talk Mahabharata 7,500 years ago. The king Bhagadatta, he came from Prague Jyotishpur to fight in the Mahabharat war from Kaurava side. If you look at the location of Prague Jyotishpur based on a Mahabharata evidence, you have to go to modern day Baghdad. In fact, the old times, now Wikipedia removed that reference. Do you know how the Iraqis would say? One of my colleagues is, by the way, from Iraq. Do you know how this? Now they have also forgotten the civilizational memory. But do you know how they say Baghdad? You'll be surprised. They say Bagada, Bagada, like as if in Bhagadatta, just the last name is missing. Just a coincidence. But my point is, there is a sufficient evidence in Mahabharata that he is from that area, Iraq. May not be proper Baghdad. That's not the point. Now, what is consistent is that exact same location is also consistent if you see the location of Prag Jyotishpur in Ramayana. So we were lucky that we have this civilizational memory embedded in the form of Ityasa, ancient Indian narrations, that many other cultures don't have. So that, I mean, I don't know what to do of it. We have what we have. I mean, it's a reality and we have to face the reality. Ravishankar ji, back to you.
Thank you. We will move on to the next questioner. Andolan, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Nilesh, namaskar. It was quite enlightening to hear the, discussion so far. One question that I had initially was already asked by the earlier audience. The one question that I would like, to know about is about the War of Ten Kings mentioned in the Vedas. Now, it so appears within the Vedas that Dasaratha, father of Lord Ram, participated in that particular battle. So that is definitely pre-Ramayana, if I'm correct. So one is on the timeline of the Ten King Wars, and specifically if some insight could be shed on the movement of people, the winner side and the defeated side, with respect to the territories of modern day India, and how the people movement happened because of that Ten King War.
Yeah.
Is there anything relevant in that?
Okay. No, great question. I will start with a metaphor. Those of you again who have worked in, say, data analytics, and that's what I have also worked in. I even teach or used to teach more. But so I'll say jokingly, what I used to do, like when teaching, say, statistics, I'll tell people, guys, how many minimum data points you have, and then people know the basic answers, like 30 data points and so on, and why, and we'll go into that. Then somebody said, but you know what? This project I'm working on, I have only one data point. Now, Nilesh, what kind of statistical test I will do? And I'm just using this as a fun story. And I will say, okay, all right, that's great. I can tell you what to do. And, I'll say, have you seen the Indian ladies wearing a bindi? That's like a one data point, one dot, or like one data point on the screen. And I said, do you know how you use it? You use it for meditation. I used to do that as a humor, which is to say, if there is a one data point, guys, that's what you have got. You can't do much. Now, I just told you this as a metaphor, but to bring it to the Dasharadnya Yuddha, a couple of points. King Dashrath did not fight in the Dashrath Yuddha. The many ancestors, long back ancestors of Ramayana, long back with Rama's time, would have participated. And also from the Kuru dynasty also, like the Bharata dynasty also, they would have participated. I mean, there is a Sudas, King Sudas. And there these names repeat. So we don't know which King Sudas and so on, but there is a decent information. The data that I talked about, it's very important to understand. Yes, there is a reference to Dasharatni Yuddha, but the information, the amount of information is so scant. It would, I mean, it will frustrate you actually if you know. Somebody I work with, her name is Kshama Shelar Govardhane. She has written a beautiful novel. It's in Marathi. And if anyone here in the audience knows Marathi and Malayali, if you can translate that in Malayalam, that would be fabulous, because it's a very fascinating, very beautiful novel that she has written. In fact, only way I came to know of her is because of this novel, okay, called Dashoratnya. The point is, she has used every single reference that is available about Dasharatnya, not only from Rigveda, but from the post literature like Brahmanas or Puranas and whatnot. And that still amounts to, the one who asked the question for your benefit, and you may already know this, amounts to not more than, say, 10 sets of data. It's extremely scant, and it is given in an indirect fashion. The subject is not even they are discussing Dasharatnya Yuddha. They are discussing something else, and they say, hey, you know what? The way, remember the Dasharatnya Yuddha, Sudas defeated this, do it like this, and stuff like that. So information available is limited. Having said that, with the research that we are doing, there are some other co-researchers with me, like Rupa Bhati. You might have heard the name, you might have listened to her talks. We are trying to do this, and I don't know if this is going to make you happy. No, actually, it doesn't make us happy. Right now, we are exploring an area from, say, 60,000 BCE, which is like 60,000 years ago, to about 26,000 BCE, which is what, 28,000 years ago, as the broad period to nail down the timing of Dasharatha Yuddha. But this is all that we could nail down. And this is also not very confident. We don't feel confident. Now, you asked me about the Mahabharata date, how confident I feel. And I said, you don't need a statistical test. We are not talking of 95% confidence. We are talking about 110% confidence. Same thing for Ramayana. Same thing for Rigveda being older than 21,000. But when the Dasharatha Yuddha comes, all we can say is, and that's also with, say, 70% confidence, that it appears it might have occurred sometime between 60,000 BC and 26,000 BC. That's all we have. As to the details, we don't have much information. So remember, again, we have to also choose the problems which are not solved, but also which has a good potential that they can be solved. So I'm with you. We are working on it. And I shared everything, the cutting edge research that we have done, I shared with you, and it's not that great right now. Back to you, Ravishankar ji.
Thank you, Anthology. I'll move on to the next questioner. Prakash, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Namaste. Thank you, moderators. Namaste, Nilesh ji. My question is, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. My question is, when you have, sir, when you have presented this, your findings for a peer review, how much opposition and support you have faced? My question is because the some of the Semitic religions, they have very limit. They have their beginning of universe, say some 5,000 or 6,000 years. So when you
Hmm.
presented facts that our civilization is goes much beyond that, what was the response you have got? Thank
Ah, good. And Ravishankar ji, if I don't know if you have a tradition on your Clubhouse channel to give a award to the best questions, but if it is, from my point of view, it will go to this question. Okay.
We do
So
appreciate Prakash for this question. Go ahead,
So,
Nilesh.
right now, no, I'm glad you asked that question. I'll give a, I'll try to keep the answer short. But it's a big, it's a, I wouldn't say loaded question, meaning you loaded it. It's a great question. Here is what happens. So you ask like when I do this in a peer reviewed, I have not published anything in a peer reviewed journal or papers or whatever, nor do I intend to do it unless like some academic is willing to partner with me, take in charge and publish this. I can assure you, if it's published in a peer reviewed journals, it will be one paper after another. They will be award winning paper. By the way, I do as a chemical engineer, bachelor's, master's, worked in corporate for many years. I understand this whole business of peer-reviewed papers. In fact, I tell academics, my academic friends, I say, guys, give me a position and tell me how many papers to crank, and I will do it. That's not the problem. The problem is right now I have no motivation. I mean, I do everything on my own dime. I mean, do my whole thing. I have no motivation to go through this very what you call a tiring, boring, irritating process, and the peer reviewed is a whole cartel, but even that cartel I can make it work. That's not a problem. So I have not published in any peer reviewed journal or thing. Then when people say, what do your peers think, and I say, well, I don't have peers. Okay. To have a peers, you have to have that somewhat similar capability. This is not, I am saying, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying to put anyone down, especially not in a Indian context, because there are many people who are genuine people trying to do things. I don't want to put myself as like some one very exceptional guy only doing thing and nobody else is doing it. That's not the case. But the fact remains that if I have to find tomorrow or today another Mahabharata researcher, or even somebody who has not done research in Mahabharata or Ramayana or Rigveda dating. Okay, I mean, there are some, but they are my colleagues, like say Rupa Bhatti. The problem is, if Rupa Bhatti says something, people say, hey, you know what? You work together, you are going to just agree with him. But is there someone who is not necessarily researching, or if he's researching, or he or she, not into my circle in the sense of not directly agrees with me, but objectively will able to peer review my work? No, I don't know a single name. And I'm not saying this with a pride, guys. I'm saying this with a lot of sadness. Okay, that is the situation. Now forget the semantic religions, I'll come to that in a second. But what about our pro-indic researchers? Pro-indic researchers, there are few exceptions, but majority are so lazy and are after getting quickly into a limelight, that they are not willing to do serious research, or not even willing to analyze the work of other researchers, or absolutely incompetent in analyzing the work of other researchers. That's a very sad state. Now let me tell you the positive thing. People from all walks of life, ordinary people, mothers, okay, mothers of the teenagers. I mean, now they see that their teenager is not, possibly losing the civilizational connection in America or even around the world. In fact, India, the risk is more than even in America as I meet the teenagers. Um, uh, they appreciate this. There are many academics. The academic field is also such a nightmare that many of them are not comfortable openly come out and support me. Although in private they say this is fascinating. I have people from IITs. I have people from IIM. I mean, the things that in Indian Institute people know. I have many professors from America. And by the way, just I'll mention, as far as the America goes, they are not Indian of Indian origin. They understand my work. When I go give a lectures here, and if there is a non-Indian audience, and obviously they have come because of their passion into this Indian civilization, but they understand it. So the second part of the question or that you asked, uh, in spite of the semantic religions or semantic thing, they're thinking only 4000 BC. See, that is a dogmatic thinking, like the world began 4000 BC. But people here in America, I'll tell you, are very open-minded. I mean, if I show Arundhati Vasishta, Bhishma Nirvana, they will come and tell me they get goosebumps. Okay. But majority of the Indians, and of course, I told you, many Indians, I mean, there are Indians from all walks of life who appreciate my work, who understand it, who comprehend it. But maybe their circumstances don't allow them to write about it. I hope that they come out and write about it. And both ways, they can write critiquing my work. I mean, you might know some names on the Twitter, Jayashree Sarnathan. Okay, I mean, she has written critiquing my work. I like it. because a genuine person will read her work, read my work, and will able to reach the conclusion. Others won't able to reach conclusion anyways. How does it matter? There is a Dr. Dieter Koch from Switzerland who has tried writing criticism, criticizing my work. There is late Prabhakar Fadnis. He has written. He was an engineer, worked for Bhabha Atomic Research Center all his life, and there are many others, and that is good. But I would tell you, if there is a group of people who struggle to understand, but are full of opinions, those are our dear Indian fellows. Okay, so as far as the Semitic that you are talking in, I can go to any university, any department, um, in America, and I mean, if I get that opportunity, and I do get opportunities, it's just a limitation of time. People are fascinated. I gave a talk at Georgia Tech just very recently, like on Rama Janmanavami area. Yeah, very fascinated. They were not only Indians, there were many non-Indians there before, after the talk. They understand it much faster. We have our biases because we have already have a date. So suppose number of you already have a 3000 BC, you are going to find it very hard to accept 5561 BC, no matter what Mahabharata evidence says, which is the dogma is also our culprit. So Shraddha is good, but Andhashraddha is bad, or dogma is bad, if that helps you. Ravishankar.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we have to unlearn a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prakash, for that fantastic question. I'll move on to the next one. Curious mind, please ask.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So, my question is, Nilesh, I would like to know. So,
Yeah.
we have this kind of oral tradition, or not like folk tradition, or whatever way you want to call it, where every temples, if you go, then there is a kind of an folklore kind of thing where they says that from which period of time this temple was, pran pratishtha has been done, or this temple has been established, right? And many
Right.
of those temples goes, as it says, that go back to the time of Mahabharata. One, I
Yeah.
think, so in Delhi is the Kalkaji. I think so. It was said, if I'm not wrong, I might be wrong. They said me that it was built by the Pandavas, or
Hmm.
Pandavas went and did some tapasya there. It was, I don't think
Hmm.
they established that. It went
Hmm.
back there. So my
Hmm.
question is this: so is there any way where, so if the temple structure usually changes with time, right? So it cannot last
Yes.
so long. But the deity there, or the linga there,
Hmm.
it is possible that it can survive. So is there
Yeah.
any mechanism where without you cannot move the deity, right? We cannot move the
Correct.
linga, but
Correct.
without moving the linga, or somehow damaging the linga, like taking out some parts of it, is there any
Correct.
way we can date it? Is there any date,
Okay.
or if if there is such a way, is there any
Yeah.
project which is going on, or have been done, like?
Okay. No, great. I understand the question, and that's also a good question. Um, so can it be done? Well, in principle, it is possible. Say, uh, again, I don't typically talk about it, but that by coincidence, as a happenstance, that's my expertise. It wasn't, I didn't start with that expertise, but like mass spectroscopy, spectrometry, and carbon dating, that's something I got into as a coincidence with my consulting work. But now, I mean, so I learned on the job, but now I'm considered an expert. Okay, so just related to this dating business, like dating in a object. Now, how do you date it? You can't date an inorganic object, okay? But you can date a organic object, which means if there is some organic material next to it, and if we can convince ourselves, or there is a sufficient evidence to say that it is from certain time layers and whatnot, then if we date that, then we can by inference estimate the timing. So that makes it very challenging, because if you look at the temples, there is a puja going on, and you are washing the deities, I mean, the snan and all that, and if the things get mixed up, so that is one issue. The second issue is, because these are the deities, we don't want to, as you said correctly, like we don't want to lift them, or things of that nature. So that is another issue. The next one you ask is there any specific research like that going on? I am not aware of any such research, but honestly, what I'll tell you, because these not the question you asked, but some very novice type of suggestions come to me, and based on that, I will say not only that, to the best of my knowledge, such a research is not going on, but I don't think we should spend time doing this kind of research. There are occasions, like there is something to you can do to inorganic material also. In some sense, it's called thermoluminescence, which is to say a subject is buried, I mean stone or whatever, a sand particle is buried under the soil for a long time, and if it's not exposed to the soil, and we can make that assumption and certain layer, we can do the thermoluminescence to figure it out when it got buried. Okay, so like different layers you can say of the temple below and stuff like that. But again, as I said, that means it involves possibly a lot of destruction, it involves a lot of cost, and unless you have a tempting reason why you want to do it, just like once you find some like this farmer in China, like he dug a well and he found this this statue. Now it makes sense if they want to expand the area and dig it more and see if there are more statues. But somebody says, well, you know what, start digging around China. I mean, China is huge. I mean, you just can't do that. So it's not my recommendation, but that is not to say I will stop anyone if somebody wants to do it. There are no easy ways to do it, but there are in principle certain methods. The problem with this is, remember, there is a Jirnodhar, we call it, right, Mandir. So the, as you said correctly, the style will change. If the temple gets old, then it will be done Jirnodhar, like a new temple will be built. And so we are taking, like we are shooting in the dark in terms of to try to find out. So even if suppose we go down and we find a date, suppose the older date we find for certain statue, murti, etc., and say it comes out 2000 BC. Now let me ask you, actually that's what people do, all the newspapers and so-called Indic researchers also do. When they find something, like, do you know the recent finding of copper tools? Okay, and I don't know if you saw the news, but the copper tools, they were found, and they are dated to 2000 BC. And jokingly, I wrote, now 100 plus Indic researchers will start saying, oh, the Mahabharata war was fought with the copper tools. I mean, it is such a utterly foolish and naive conclusion, but that's what you see in the newspapers. You find something in archaeology, a arrow or something, a chariot or something, and immediately people start shouting, Mahabharata happened that day. Similarly, because a Sthala Puran, that is what you're referring to, refers to Pandavas supposedly built that mandir, it is a statement. We don't know for sure it is a right or wrong. But even if it is true, we have no necessarily evidence that we will find the evidence from a Pandava's time. So it is a literally shooting in the dark. I don't encourage it. If somebody does it, I will not stop that person. That's my response. Ravishankar ji.
Thank you, Nilesh. Thank you, Curious. I will move on to the next one. RP, please go ahead.
Namaskar, sir. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Namaskar. Sir, I want to ask a question regarding the Kerala. The means Kerala, a narration around us is that Kerala mainland is not connected with Indian mainland, and there is no culture relation between both Hinduism in the mainland and the Kerala. We came from somebody is telling that from the Sri Lanka, and we started with Buddhism like that. Jaina, Jainism like that. So, can you explain any relation, or can you tell us any relation you have heard regarding the Mahabharata or any other scripts with the Kerala culture or any places related to us? And if it
Okay.
is not there, why it is?
Yeah. Okay. No, great question. Two aspects. One is the, you call khandan and a mandan, or sowing the seeds and removing the weeds. So let me do the sowing the seeds first, which is, if you go to Mahabharata, you will see the reference to Kerala as a geographic land, but sometime even the word Kerala, okay, that you will find. It is a very ancient word. You actually find that in the Mahabharata also. And now what some people will do, the so-called modern researchers of last 200 years, see, they will assume that Kerala name has to be a new one. And they say, look, the name is exist in the Mahabharata and Ramayana, therefore somebody must have inserted it. Now, I'm not denying that possibility. But if somebody is claiming that something is inserted, and yes, the things have got added sometime here and there into Mahabharata, Ramayana, things even get, there are these different types of error: transcription error, transliteration error, transposition errors, interpolation errors. A note of somebody writing on a palm leaf, the next guy who is copying it doesn't know whether it is to be included original text or not, because people used to take notes also in the shloka form. That way it's easy to remember. And you can see that. My point is, if somebody claims such a thing that it was inserted afterwards, the onus is on that person. That's what scientific acumen is. The onus is on that person to show with evidence why it appears even very likely. That's what science does, not absolute or very likely versus less likely, why that might have been inserted. My point is, so far nobody has shown such evidence. People talk about it all the time, very in a ballistic fashion, but when you ask them for evidence, they shut their mouth and run away. So there are descriptions of Kerala as a word in Mahabharata. So yes, it is there that time, also in the Ramayana. So no question of this. Now this Jainism, Buddhism, some we came from other places. Well, you know what? These are opinions, right? Now, if they have evidence, they need to present it. Now, I will ask you that now they're removing the weeds. When next time somebody tells you or any one of us who is listening, not in an angry fashion, we should in a very calm fashion ask them, oh, excellent, that's I never heard that, or I have heard this before, but I always curious, what is the evidence? Ask for evidence and don't stop. Somebody says, oh, it is written by some professor at this university. No, that is again authority fallacy. We have to, if we are truly curious, we have to go to the next step. Where did this professor got that information and what is his or her evidence? See, guys, this is tapasya. That's why I say Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Pradnya. This is not an easy journey. Then we will know. But then also we have to be strategically aware, like how people are trying to fool us, you know. And one thing is, maybe they are trying to fool us. That is understandable because they have something to gain from it. What is it that we have to gain by being foolish and being novice and being lazy? That is the question all of us need to ask ourselves. Why do we fall for such nonsense at a drop of a hat? Why do we not ask the question, and why do we stop asking question? Because asking one time is not sufficient. What is the evidence? And the guy says, oh, professor from there has written that book, to go read the book. And you say, oh, thank you. Well, of course say thank you, but if you're curious, go read that book, go to the bottom of it. You know what I have found, and everyone of you will find, many of the cross references given by these so-called junta of Indic researchers around the world are absolutely fake. Meaning, when they will say something based on certain evidence and give some other professor's name and other professor's book or some reference research paper, many times that research paper doesn't exist. If the research paper exists and you go read it and even cross references, you don't find any evidence. So the lot of fraud in a broad daylight has taken place, is taking place. And if we truly care, then we have to get to the Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Pradnya. Thank you. Ravishankar ji.
Thank you, Nilesh. Thank you, R. For those who are interested in Nilesh's books, I have pinned the link on the top. All his books are there. Please do buy them, read them, because actually more explanations on what we discussed today and actually all the evidences and everything is in the book. And I have personally read them, so I can vouch for it. So please actually buy them, read them, and actually expand your knowledge. ഇവിടെ ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ നൈലേഷിയുടെ ബുക്കുകളുടെ ലിങ്ക് ഞാൻ മുകളിൽ കൊടുത്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. അത് താല്പര്യമുള്ളവർക്ക് അത് വാങ്ങിക്കാനുള്ള സൗകര്യമാണത്. അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ബുക്കുകൾ ഞാൻ വായിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്, അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ അതിൻ്റെ ഗുണത്തെപ്പറ്റി എനിക്ക് പറയാനായിട്ട് സാധിക്കും. എല്ലാവർക്കും അത് ഉപകാരപ്പെടുമെന്ന് പ്രതീക്ഷിക്കുന്നു. തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും അത് ഉപയോഗിക്കാനായിട്ട് അഭ്യർത്ഥിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നു. I will move on to the next questioner. Jatin, please go ahead.
Yeah, namaskar. Yeah, first of all, great to talk to Nilesh. So, actually, I had read this book, I think a year back, and I was intrigued by the title. The title was very catchy. So, I read it. Though I did not understand the astrological part because I'm not an expert in Jyotish. But what I gathered from reading the book, the methodology is what you are doing is you are reading from the sculptures, the shlokas of the Mahabharata, and even the Ramayana, because you have written on Ramayana as well. So you are trying to get all the graha nakshatra positions, also the solar eclipses, the full moon, half moon, and all those things. And then using that, you are trying, using the software which you have with a given accuracy, you are trying to go back in time and then come up with the date when that particular event in the Mahabharata would have happened. So actually, first of all, I don't know like whether astrology can be considered a science or is it pseudoscience, but that is debatable. But let us assume that we are going ahead with whatever is in the written and we are taking it. So actually, whenever after that I went on Twitter, and I think you have already mentioned there are some other Indic researchers like Raja Rammohan Rai, Jayashri Saranant, something like that, and they have also written some papers, academic papers. So their primary question is that they are saying that you have an end goal in mind, like the date you had already decided, and you are interpreting some of the Greh Nakshatra positions or the words in the Sanskrit differently to achieve match with your goal. And secondly, it becomes very difficult for us because I read some of their threads also. So it becomes very confusing for a layman because I'm not an expert in Jyotish, that who to trust. So because they are raising many questions, so are you planning to reply to them through academic paper because she has written a book, or are you going to come on a common platform with some debates face to face, like, because as a layman we want to know like what is the right thing, because there's a lot of back and forth going on. Thank you.
Yeah, great question, Jatin. I think I heard the name. Okay, a lot of things there. So the first explanation that you gave as like what I am doing, like my method, looking at all the references from Mahabharata, Ramayana, and then trying to do the translation or interpret, let's say, then use a software and do it. That is directionally correct, but just do understand. I mean, you and of course everyone else who is listening, it is a correct explanation to a 6-year old. Okay, it's not that simple. Not nor I want to make it like, oh my god, it's so complicated that no one can understand. But no, it is bit simplistic. uh, what helps, I mean, that's correct, what you said is actually correct, but it is a partial truth, not the whole truth. The idea is to find such references, which is what I call in science, what we call crucial evidence, crucial experiment, which otherwise, just like Arundhati Vasishtha that I mentioned today, which people, all astronomers, even modern astronomers until 2009 said it's impossible. Okay, modern astronomers. Why 2009? I am sometime, these professors of astronomy from famous universities of America. Sometime they will become aware of it. They will write to me, and I will give a response to them. And they will write something which is laughable. They will say, "Oh, I don't understand how based on a proper motion, blah blah will happen." I said, "Where in the world? Where did I say proper motion?" Which means even the basic comprehension doesn't exist. Okay, so this is of, I'm talking of the academics right there. Then the one thing you said a lot of things. One thing otherwise you said is astrology versus astronomy. Let me clarify that. It's very important, which tells you that you have not read the books, which is okay, but now you better read those. And I presume that you have read some writings of what's the name you said, Jay Sri Sarnathan or Rajaram Mohan Roy. I presume you have read them, and that's great, by the way. But if you have read them, then you have a onus to read my books, okay? Even afterwards. I'll come to them in a
Ye-
second.
Yes,
So what happens?
Nilesh,
Yeah.
I have read them, your book, and also the threads by them. But actually, they have a lot of Jyotish technical content, so it is difficult to understand actually.
Okay,
So
but before that, yeah, no, great point, and I'm glad you have read both, and still it is confusing. It's perfectly understandable. First thing, let's clarify that what I am talking astronomy is a astronomy in a Khagol Shastra. I'm not saying you are confusing it, but many people may easily confuse. You use the word astrology, so therefore it's very important. Astronomy is what I have done, not the astrology, like as in a Phala Jyotish and Jupiter's has a drushti on the second house and a seventh house and 10th house. That's not what I'm talking about. It is like a literally what the way you see and a consistent explanation of this. Okay, so astronomy, not astrology. Now, what Jayashree Sarnathan does, she does a mixture of astrology, astronomy. She will go wherever it helps her. I don't think Rajaram Mohan Roy gets into astrology, but if you have read Jayashree Sarnathan, by the way, I'll mention something so that people don't take it like because they are criticizing me, I have something against. First thing, I'm very happy that they're doing what they're doing. Okay, that way they are uh, causing this Samudra Manthan that is very much required. So I'm thankful to them. Now, Jayashree Sarnathan, she will just take that mixed path and sometime go in astrology, astronomy, wherever, so that's in fact, I'll just mention today because we talked Dwarka. Like once I brought up the evidence that there is no sea level rising whatsoever between 3500 BC to 1500 BC, and since she claims 3136 BC, she changed her theory for a Krishna's Dwarka destruction. She said it did not happen because of sea level rise. So in a way, she's smart that she at least understands the evidence. And she said that happened because the land went down. Okay. Now, whether that happened or not, hey, that's a good thesis, right? I mean, people should study and see the evidence and decide what to do with it. Actually, land did go down. I mean, if the water comes gushing in, it will go down. If there's earthquake, it may go down, and so on. But that's a different subject. Now, what was the other thing? Oh, yeah, one more thing. You said, is the astronomy science, not astrology, by the way, so correct that. Is like a truly scientific, you don't know. Well, let me tell you, give you a news. The most successful theory of a modern science of last 500 years is the theory of cosmology, also known as astronomy. There is no other theory. Now these days we have a genetics slash evolution, a lot of stuff coming, but there are no I mean, there are lots of successful theories, but no other theory which comes anywhere close to the success and the precision and the accuracy that was achieved in modern science in the world of astronomy. What to speak of that? The very discipline of modern science came into being last 500 years. Think of all the names that immediately come to your mind: Copernicus, Tycho Brahe, Kepler, Galileo, Newton, Maxwell, Faraday, Einstein, Lagrange. These are all into astronomy. Einstein, by the way, okay, all into astronomy. So it is the most successful theory of modern science. And of course, very fascinating Indian astronomy. In spite of that, if I don't mean you, but if somebody says, I'm not so sure, well, tough luck, I wouldn't have anything more to say. The last one about this, what these guys are doing and the debate. I propose, not I propose, like when Sri Sarnathan came up with her debate idea. She did not come, I don't know where it came, but she came up with this date and Nilesh is wrong. I said, let's come and debate. Now, so she first, started putting some condition. I don't know what is her statement these days. You can tell me. You might be following her more. She follows me, by the way. I don't follow her, but sometimes people will send me some comments of her. She has, you may know, she has written a whole book, which the title has a Nilesh Nilakanta Oak in it, and I thank her for that. By the way, when somebody sent me the book, a digital book, and I did control find and put my name, it came like a 500 times and then it stopped. It said you are being mentioned more than 500 plus times. So that's some humor side. But let me say something about her, which is to say she's an extremely spirited woman, lady, dynamic. She is very knowledgeable about the Tamil culture or even the Indian culture. She does a lot of research. And even when she takes a stance which is exactly opposite or in total against like what I'm saying, I find that as a very good activity. I find that actually many times useful. In trying to defend my things, she will quote something, and I will find that information, I may find that information useful in somewhere else. So I am very thankful for the enterprise that she is running. In fact, she has written that the book that she wrote, and now she came up with a new edition of that same book, the falsity of the epoch of Arundhati that we talked today, by Nilesh Nilakanta Oak. She came up with a second edition. Now, do you know what she did? She sold 10,000 plus copies of her first book. Now, that will tell you how many books my book sold. And, by the way, I don't take royalty from my books. When the Subhu publication, the Indian publisher came to me and said, Sir, what are your expectations? I said, my only expectation is take this book to every Indian household, every Indian library, and so on. My point is, even a book criticizing my work has sold 10,000 plus copies, and even a sufficient interest that she could come up with a second edition. This is all good. This is all good, Manthan. The issue with Rajaram Mohan Roy is very different. Okay, so first thing I'll just answer the question that you said, which is said, I am interpreting, or both of them say, I just manipulate and this and that. Well, you have read both books. You have to come to that conclusion. If you are not sufficiently knowledgeable, then you have to increase that knowledge. Okay, that is that smriti, developing the background knowledge. And somewhere you have to have a Shraddha. Like, see, today you came to the talk because you have some Shraddha in me, not the 100%. And you read their works because you were curious to say who the hell is right, right? And that's a great thing. I concluded my talk today by saying that I want you to read my books, my blogs, watch my videos, but also the videos and books and blogs of other Mahabharata researchers. We, each one of us, has to become that intellectual Kshatriya. So that is the point. Now, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, he has taken a very specific position, and there are some other uh, so-called academics and some decorated people who are supporting him. Is absolutely his single-minded goal is to discredit Nilesh Oak. Single-minded goal. And it's, although it is a very demonic goal, I encourage, and I mean, I welcome that goal with gusto. Now, if you understand that, then you understand Nilesh Oak. Because I'm not doing this for personal glory. You don't have to take my word for it. Sometime if we meet over a coffee, I can tell you, what has to sacrifice. Just like in the music, a sitar guy has to sacrifice something, and a flute guy has to sacrifice something. It's the same thing. This is not a field where you come into it to become rich. In fact, if you know the what is that guy, Branson, Sir Branson, the Virgin Atlantic guy, he has a joke, right? He says, how you become a millionaire. He said, you start with $1 billion in your pocket, and then you enter into airline industry. That's how you become a billionaire to a millionaire. As this is a good metaphor for anyone coming into this area. If you are doing a genuine research and not just some research to be in a limelight, yeah, basically you're not going to make money. You're going to lose your money, lose your career. I mean, not lose, but you may not able to progress or whatnot. That is the risk people take. We don't know why we take this risk, but he has an extremely demonic initiative under him. Even then, when he what he writes, I'm very happy. Then now he gave a talk, like some of the platforms. I said, guys, just be calm and invite him to the platform and let him speak, because the kind of utter foolishness he talks, if I tell people that he has said such a nonsensical thing, unless it is recorded in a YouTube video, nobody will believe that he is saying such a thing. So it is a good manthan. And just like what you did, and I forgot the name, but I congratulate you and I thank you for studying on the both sides. I think that is what is required on both sides, but we have a limited time, so people have to decide, what to take with the Shraddha, because we cannot be expert in every field, and what to take with this. My point is, whatever you are convinced about, even say you are convinced about Jai Shri Saranathan, my point is, still go tell your friends, children, colleagues, and so on. One day your child will say, well, hold on, Jai Shri Saranathan, that dad you taught me is this, but I read came across Nilesho who is saying different. Now that will spur his curiosity, your child's curiosity or her curiosity, and they will take the next path of synthesizing this text. That's how the progress will happen. Long answer. uh, Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jatin. And also, Nilesh, actually, if any one of them, Rajaram Mohan Roy or any one of them, would like to have a debate, we would happily provide the platform for it, because we think
Yeah,
Clubhouse is a perfect platform because anybody from anywhere in the world can join and talk about it.
correct. And
Yeah.
Ravishankar ji,
Anyways,
let me make one comment there quickly.
sure.
That last part I forgot. So about the debate, like, have I done the debate with them? Well, I will not mention all the names, but at least I'll take the names that you have mentioned, you have taken, and I can mention other names, no problem. I'll mention a couple others. So, for example, Jayashree Salnathan, then she made all kinds of tantrums, all kinds of excuses, and ran away multiple times. My offer to debate with her is open. Now she started putting the various kinds of crazy conditions on these platforms, like saying she will select the 5 judges, and they will be there. I said, yeah, you know what, the judges has to be, I said, even she can select the 5 judges, that's fine. Although organizers did not agree with it, they said, if there are four, two should be from Nilesh will select, two you will select, one they will select, or something. My point is, I'm willing to do it with judges, without judges. My only condition is that everything should be recorded, including the what judges say, how they say it, how they reach that conclusion. If there are judges, everything should be on the camera. Other than that, I have no other condition. And of course, the basic rules follow, that people should not interrupt, and so on and so forth. Now, one thing important, for example, with Jay Shri Saranathan, I am ready for a debate. Okay. With Rajaram Mohan Roy in the current state, I will not do the debate because he has nothing to debate. Now people will say, come on, what do you mean? Like he's saying you are wrong and you are saying you are right. No, that's not how the debate takes place. That's why we need to understand the scientific method. We have to understand Nyaya Darshana. What he wants to do is called Vitanda. Okay, it is undesired, and one intelligent person should not participate into such thing. Now, Jai Sri Sarnathan's view may be to win, just to get the victory, and she may not be interested in the truth. But still, I'm willing to do because she has a date. She has done some tapashcharya and she has a date 3136 BC. Okay, and it has to be apples to apples discussion, and I'm willing to do it. This fellow Rajaram Mohan Roy has no date of his own, and Nyaya Darshana, for example, says Swaprati Paksha Sthapana Hino Vitanda. If you want to fight with someone, debate with someone on a specific point, if you don't have your original position, and the position cannot be you are wrong, the position should be you are saying 5561 BC, I do not agree with it. Actually, I am saying 1793 BC. Then there can be a true debate in the Indian tradition, but frankly, even in the scientific tradition. And that's why I will not do debates with this. There are many other people, like say the one I'll mention, couple others, Jijit Nadumuri Ravi. We had planned debate in Bangalore. This is in 2020. So he said, yeah, he want to represent 1793 BC, and I said 5561 BC. When actually he came there, he totally dropped that idea right on the platform, 1793 BC, and he started talking utterly nonsensical, some region, like how it cannot happen before 3200 BC and after 1400 BC, somewhere there, or 1000 BC. No, that was not the subject. We have to agree on a subject. That is the problem. Then like this, you might know the name. What's his I'm not getting the name now. Something Mishra. Oh god, N, it starts with the N, forgive me. Now he at one point expressed his willingness to come and debate with me. Now this was going to be a specific point, and then he said he will come in July to the platform, and then he just ran away. Okay, starts the name with N, is just not coming to me right now. Last name Mishra, and he's a Sanskrit expert, not so much into this, but he has opinions and all kinds of things about the area here that he does not understand at all, such as astronomy. But that's also welcome. If he has a date, I'm willing to do a debate. Sorry, long answer, but you asked me that. So by the way, one more point I will add, Jatin, is that right now in the dating of Mahabharata or Ramayana, go in the public domain, which is to say YouTube, and see where are the debates. The only two debates, and if there be more, I might have forgotten, that you are going to find, and in both debates, I am there. One with Dr. Konrad Elst and one with Dr. Manish Pandit. 3 parts on a Sangam, and Konrad Elst with you can find on a YouTube. No other person, no other individuals are even doing a debate. So it is such a unfortunate or foolish thing on part of these people that you named, claiming that I'm not ready for the debate. Some people just don't have the basic understanding or basic claim for debate, and others are running away from the debate. That is the reality. But I am open for a debate as long as the basic conditions of scientific acumen, logical reasoning, as well as Nyaya Darshana principles are accepted, and as long as they are willing for a uncut, unedited debate on the camera, including the judges or whoever, if they want them. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilesh. I know we have taken a lot of time, but one last question which came from the audience. Many questions came, but actually I think this is pertinent. Just one question. You can give a short answer if you like.
Sure.
The question is this: Mahabharat war speaks about spoked wheels, weapons, elephants, etc. The Indus Valley civilization that existed from around 3500 BC to 1900 BC doesn't speak about spoked wheels and elephant. Further, Indus Valley civilization was a Bronze Age civilization. For a war like Mahabharata, it can't happen with the bronze. It requires iron. So, how do you collaborate this?
Okay. Great question. I'll try to, 3, 4 questions there. I'll try to make the answer as short as possible since we have gone long over time. Okay. Ravishankar ji, I might have to ask you to repeat those questions. Can you repeat the very first argument there?
Sure. So, the first part of the question is that the Mahabharata war speaks about spoked wheels, weapons, and elephants.
Yeah.
The Indus Valley civilization that existed from around 3500 BC to 900 BC doesn't
Yeah.
speak about spoked wheels and
Okay.
elephant.
Very good. Very good. Stop there. Great question there. Because it's very easy to falsify that how this question itself is wrong. Wrong in the sense the information based on which this person is asking the questions, whoever is not about that person, is not correct. For example, the Indus civilization is not from 3500 BC. In fact, it goes back to Mehergarh 7000 BC further. Also, this is arbitrarily decided. What is Indus Valley civilization? The Sindhu Nadi exists from Rigveda, and the Saraswati. It's a truly Sindhu Saraswati civilization, and now we have a evidence that's going back to easily 75,000 years and going beyond that. So first thing, that's not correct. But even taking the modern definition of so-called Indus Valley civilization as like a 3500 BC and afterwards, this civilization and the object found in this civilization has both evidence of a spoked wheel, even in the toys, for heaven's sake. On the toys there is evidence of spoked wheel, and there are many what you call those uh, I'm getting the word, like, badges, like those small things that are found, like inch 2 inch thick. um, they have many pictures of elephants. Even the famous Pashupati seal, the seals, yeah, Pashupati seal that is dated to like around 2600 BC, 2800 BC, has the elephant on it. So I don't know what information was used to even ask the question. Let's go to the second part of the question.
Sure. Let me take that. So the second part, further, Indus Valley civilization was a Bronze Age civilization. For a war like Mahabharata, it can't happen with the bronze. It requires iron. So how do
Yeah.
you collaborate this?
Okay. Very good. One important thing to understand is how this Bronze Age was decided. Just like in the Indian context, we use the framework of Chatur Yuga, like, Satya Yuga, Dwapar, Treta Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, Kali Yuga. These are not of a fixed ages, fixed time, and anything like this. Similarly, the West used the Stone Age, and then the Copper Age, and Bronze Age, and Iron Age, and so on and so forth, with a very what you call say elementary level of understanding. When the archaeology began 150 200 years or whatever that is, it was a reasonable framework because they had nothing. With time, actually long time ago now, but we know that these are all useless frameworks. Why they are useless? Because, like, so bronze or copper, that stays because it doesn't rust. It may have a layer, but it doesn't rust as much like iron, whereas iron tools rust and they can totally get destroyed over time. The second problem with that is, what is the Iron Age? I mean, people don't read like whatever they have studied in their school or their degree program, and then they never bother to update their knowledge. Initially, they said Iron Age in India is a 200 BC. By the way, the age changes by the place. Why it changes by the place? Because again, a very illogical way of inferring from the archaeology records. When you find something in archaeology, what all that it tells you is that definitely at that time that object existed. It does not tell you anything about that type of object, whether bronze or copper or iron, before that, unless you have found the evidence. Pramana Taschartha Pratipatti is what Nyaya Darshan says. We can only talk about the evidence that we have. We cannot talk about the evidence that we don't have. In fact, the next verse says Pramana Anupapatti Upapattibhyam. The evidence that we don't have, the non-existent evidence, doesn't help you to prove something, doesn't help you to disprove something, which takes these folks into something called fallacy, and that fallacy is absence of evidence they treat as equal to evidence of absence. That's simply not true. And of course the iron rust, that's why it is an issue. But the first point is correct, that yes, there is a mention of iron. There is in Mahabharata, there is a mention of iron in even the Ramayana, and there is a mention of iron in the Rigveda also. There may be different types of iron. It could be ironified stone, whatever it is. That's right. But the way that evidence is put is a Bronze Age and Iron Age is utterly foolish. Those are very old ideas. They needs to be discarded. They have stuck in the academia because academicians are lazy. They don't want to change. They're hanging on to their chairs and they get their money. So go to the next part, if there was a next part to the
The
questions.
last part of the question is why there is no archaeological evidence.
Okay. Again, if you are looking for, see, this is so the simple answer is people have to understand what archaeology is. If they are looking for a, say they dig further down, go to the 6th millennium layer, and now they find a bow and an arrow, and on the bow it is written this is Arjuna's dhanusha called Gandiva, or they find Sudarshan Chakra, then they are into fool's paradise. They're extremely novice in what they're asking. They don't understand astronomy, they don't understand archaeology, they don't understand how the dating is done, they do not understand even the process of archaeology. For example, if you go to museums, any museums, you find lots of objects, archaeological objects, and that may give us the false impression that, oh, so much archaeology evidence is there. What people don't realize is that so much rich archaeology evidence that we find in the museums is actually 0.000000001% of actually what happened, and most of that evidence, if not all, is found through happenstance data by a lucky coincidence. So we cannot talk of what we have not found. This has nothing to do with the empirical evidence. This has to do with the logic and intellect, okay, and how to think properly. That is the job of all our darshan shastras, how to think properly, and how to not look at the evidence and exactly draw the reverse conclusion. For example, Bhagavad Gita talks about tamasi buddhi, adharmam dharmam itiya manyate tamasavruta sarvarthan viparitamsha buddhisa partha tamasi. A tamasi buddhi looks at dharma and thinks it's adharma, or sarvarthan viparitamsha. Actually, meaning is there. It takes exactly opposite meaning, 180-degree opposite, just like the likes of Rajaram Mohan Roy are doing. It's laughable. So I think I mean, again, this is not directed at the person who asked the question, but it is at the content of the question, that it is laughable to even ask this question, and this is the kind of hubris that is been fed to us. That's why everyone in India, I find, or Indian context, everyone is not just the person who is asking the question. It's not about him or her. Everyone obsessed with this archaeology evidence, and my simple answer is they do not understand what archaeology is, how archaeological evidence is found, how it is to be interpreted. And maybe we can stop on this one.
Thank you, Nilesh ji. So we had a really wonderful session. I think the people can't have enough of you. There are so many questions coming in, but I am stopping here. And our request to you is probably you should come here again, probably on a different subject. Many people
Definitely.
have suggested Surya Siddhanta for it,
Yes,
and
I would love to. Yeah.
yeah, so I will talk about that through our conversation. And
Yes.
I have to mention that actually only in Clubhouse we had about 565 people listened to the program. So that's a good number, and many people have listened. And many, I mean, if I open the hand raising, there will be many more people coming up to ask questions too. But since we have gone for 3 hours now, so we better stop here. If you would tell me a few words, let the audience know how you like this session or how you feel about this session.
You mean me, or
Yes,
you are
yes,
asking
yes.
audience members?
No, 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 no.
Me?
Nilesh ji,
Oh,
yourself.
you are asking audience members, right?
No, 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 no. I am asking Nilesh ji that
Okay.
how do you like this session? Actually, did you enjoy it? What do you feel?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, no, the great question. I will answer that. 2 years ago, sorry, 1 year ago, one my good friend Stuti Pandeji from Midwest, like Denver, she introduced me to Clubhouse, and actually she wanted me to come on Clubhouse, and I did one time. And what I found is that actually when I went, I think couple of times and gave a talk, I did not enjoy it at all. Okay, that was my experience then. And what I found is like people are coming at any point in between, they're leaving at any point. So like something that I have covered, they're asking the question again, and I'm saying, my God, didn't I say this 15 minutes ago? And so it wasn't a lot of fun. I also found the questions that time, those two sessions, to be extremely naive and almost irritating. Let me tell you today's experience. Every question, not even a single exception, all the questions were brilliant. And by the way, like, when I give a tough answers, don't take it like I am being personal to the person who asked the question or even what they're asking. Actually, that's a great opportunity for me to convey the truth. Okay, So every single questions was phenomenal, which somewhere tells me maybe it's a effect of your Clubhouse that they are getting used to this thing. Maybe they are doing their reading like some other individual, I think Jatin or whoever, he has bothered to go and read all the books on both sides. That is exactly what is required. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. And Ravishankar ji, I will also mention, based on those two experiences versus here, yes, they had a moderators, but it was not moderated in a methodical fashion. The way you are doing it is very good. And frankly, I mean, I told Stuti ji, I said with a great respect to her, but I said I don't want to come again to the Clubhouse. So so if you remember, you when I was talking with you, and you said you also record it and kind of put it as a podcast equivalent or something, and I said I thought that's a great idea. And frankly, after this session, I would say your moderation, but everyone who attended, and of course I don't know them, but everyone who asked the question, they were all wonderful questions, very intelligent questions, because that allowed me to say what I wanted to say, which I could not say in my lecture. And they were well thought out questions. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Nilesh. And it's been wonderful. And even I have to thank all the audiences who came up for asking the questions, those who listened. We had a steady audience from the beginning, even for 3 hours. Actually, I still see people who were there from the very beginning, even before you were joining. So I believe actually that they have, and I have receiving comments and everything in the background, back channel, that it's been a really pleasure to have you here. And I know, if you remember, I know we have been talking about this for about 3 months now, and it's been really worth it. And I'll definitely actually talk to you about actually doing one more
Sure.
one more session actually, if it's possible, down the line. I will check the dates and everything with you, if about Surya Siddhartha, which is also a great topic to have. And
Yes.
I'm not taking it too long. We will wind up at this point. And Nilesh, any last words?
No, you have said everything. I have said everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nilesh. So I would finish off as in Malayalam. ഇന്ന് നമ്മളെ കേൾക്കാനായിട്ട് വന്ന എല്ലാവർക്കും പ്രത്യേകം നന്ദി പറയുന്നു. മുകളിലേക്ക് ചോദ്യം ചോദിക്കാനായിട്ട് വന്നവർക്കും അതുപോലെ ഇത് കേട്ടിരുന്നവർക്കും മോഡറേറ്റേഴ്സിന് എല്ലാവർക്കും. I especially thank Nilesh ji for having this session with us. We are indebted to you. And those who have asked the questions, those who have been listening from the very beginning, we thank all of you. And it's been a real pleasure to have you all here. And on this note, actually, I'm winding up this session, and you all have a really good evening. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Satyameva Jayate.